Welcome to Eerie Shadow. I always thought I knew my neighborhood. The quiet, tree-lined street, the neatly trimmed lawns, the polite nods exchanged between residents. It all seemed so ordinary. But what if the person next door isn't who you think they are? What if, behind their locked doors, they hide something far more sinister than you could ever imagine? It started with the noises. Soft at first, almost unnoticeable. A faint tapping against the wall in the dead of night, like fingernails scraping against wood. Then came the whispers, low and urgent, slipping through the vents when the rest of the world was asleep. I tried to ignore them. I told myself it was just the wind, the house settling, my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down I knew something wasn't right. We all like to think we know our neighbors. We wave at them in the mornings, exchange pleasantries at the mailbox, and occasionally share casual small talk. But do we ever really know what happens behind their closed doors? For the past 6 months, I've lived in a modest apartment complex on the outskirts of town. It's an aging structure, the kind where the walls are thin enough to hear muffled conversations, the groaning of pipes late at night, and the occasional distant cry of a baby. The hallway lights flicker inconsistently, buzzing faintly like a chorus of dying fireflies. My unit is on the 3rd floor, right next to a man named Mr. Holloway. He kept to himself, barely speaking to anyone, always wearing the same faded gray hoodie with the hood pulled up over his face. His posture was hunched, as if he carried a weight the rest of us couldn't see. His movements were slow, deliberate, like he was conserving energy for something unknown. At first, I didn't think much of it. People have their own lives, their own struggles. Who was I to judge? But then the strange occurrences began, subtle at first, like whispers on the wind. It started with the noises. Late at night, when the apartment complex had settled into its usual lull, I'd hear shuffling footsteps in the hallway, long, dragging steps, like someone pulling something heavy. At first, I assumed it was an insomniac neighbor pacing, but then I noticed the pattern. Always the same time, always stopping right outside my door. One night I woke to the sound of breathing, not my own. A slow, raspy inhale, a pause, then a wheezing exhale. It was close, too close, just beyond my bedroom wall, where my bed pressed up against the partition that separated my apartment from Mr. Holloway's. I held my breath, listening. The breathing didn't stop. It was steady, methodical, like something waiting. Then there were the smells. At odd hours, a sickly sweet scent seeped through the vents, heavy and cloying, like decayed fruit left in the sun. It coated the back of my throat, making me gag. I tried telling myself it was nothing. Old buildings had their quirks. But one night, I stepped out to check the hallway, and I saw something that shattered any illusion of normalcy. Mr. Holloway's door was ajar, just slightly. And from the darkened crack, a single eye peered out at me. Bloodshot, unblinking, I froze. The hallway was too quiet, too empty. Then, slowly, The door creaked shut. Something inside me whispered that I should move out. But it was already too late. It wasn't just the noises. It was the way his curtains were always drawn, even in the middle of the day. The way he never accepted packages directly from the delivery guy, insisting they be left at the door. The odd, metallic smell that occasionally seeped from his apartment, sickly sweet and unmistakable. One evening, as I was locking my door, I saw him struggling to drag a large black garbage bag down the hallway. The bag was heavy, so heavy that he had to stop every few steps to adjust his grip. A dark red smear trailed behind him on the floor. Our eyes met for the briefest moment. His were hollow, unreadable. He gave me a stiff nod and disappeared down the stairwell. My throat tightened, my pulse quickened. I wanted to believe it was nothing. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. Curiosity turned into obsession. It slithered into my thoughts like a shadow creeping along the walls, twisting my perception until I found myself hyper-focused on every little detail. I began to notice things I hadn't before. The odd deliveries that arrived at his doorstep long past midnight. Thick, unmarked boxes that the courier always left without waiting for a signature. The way the air felt heavier whenever I walked past his door, as if something unseen was pressing against it from the inside. Then there were the whispers. Muffled, urgent, leaking through the walls like a secret trying to escape. The words were foreign, guttural, almost inhuman in cadence. I pressed my ear against the wall one night, straining to make sense of it, but the moment I did, the voices stopped. A dense, suffocating silence settled in their place, thick with unspoken warnings. The night I saw him in the backyard, I should have turned away. Moonlight draped over his figure like a pale, skeletal hand, casting long shadows against the overgrown weeds. He moved slowly, methodically, the rhythmic scrape of his shovel cutting through the night's stillness. His hoodie was damp with sweat, clinging to his hunched frame. He never once looked up, never once acknowledged that someone, me, was watching from my window, barely breathing. By morning, the ground was different. The soil was raw, disturbed, but there was no sign of what had been buried, nor what had been dug up. What was he hiding? The question lodged itself in my brain like a splinter, throbbing, pulsing, demanding answers. I knew I shouldn't interfere. I told myself over and over, this wasn't my business. But that didn't stop the feeling. That gnawing, sinking sensation like a warning pressing against the edges of my mind. So one night, against every rational instinct, I did something I never should have done. I knocked on his door. The sound echoed down the empty hallway, loud in the suffocating quiet. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat reverberating in my ears, silence. Then soft, deliberate footsteps. The kind that make your breath catch. The kind that make you want to run. The door creaked open just a crack, revealing a sliver of darkness. And within that sliver, an eye, bloodshot, unblinking, fixed on me like a predator watching its prey. What do you want? His voice rasped, dry and raw, as if it hadn't been used in days. Or perhaps it had been used for something else, something that drained it of warmth, of humanity. I swallowed hard. My throat was dry, my palms clammy. Hey, I live next door, just wanted to check in, see if everything's okay. A pause, an excruciating silence where I swore I could hear something shifting behind him, something moving in the unseen dark. Then, without another word, the door shut. A slow, deliberate click of the lock, and suddenly the hallway felt too empty, too quiet, too wrong. That night, sleep was impossible. My mind churned with grotesque possibilities, each one worse than the last. My apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in, suffocating me with the weight of unspoken horrors. Every shadow in the room seemed deeper, every creak of the building suddenly suspicious. The air was thick, heavy with the kind of silence that makes you strain to hear something, anything, just to know you're not alone. Then, at 2 a.m., I heard it. A low, dragging sound. Slow. Relentless. Like something too heavy being pulled across the floor. My pulse pounded in my ears as I slipped out of bed, each step toward the door feeling like I was moving through molasses. I hesitated before pressing my eye to the peephole, the cool glass chilling my skin. My breath hitched. Mister. Holloway stood in the dimly lit hallway, his frail frame hunched, straining under the weight of what he carried. But it wasn't a thing. It was a person. A limp, lifeless form swathed in a sheet, stained with something dark and wet. The fabric clung to the contours of a human body, slack limbs swinging slightly with every step he took. His arms trembled under the burden, but his pace was eerily methodical, like this wasn't the first time. Like he had done this before. A sharp gasp escaped my lips before I could stop it. I staggered back. The floor groaned beneath my weight. Then he stopped. His head snapped up, sudden and unnatural, like a marionette whose strings had been yanked too hard. Slowly, his hooded face turned toward my door. For a fraction of a second, I made the worst mistake possible. I looked back through the peephole. His eye was already there, staring back at me. A single, bloodshot orb, wide and unblinking, filled with something primal, something that didn't belong in the gaze of an ordinary man. My breath caught in my throat. My body turned to stone. He knew. He knew I had seen, and he wasn't going to pretend otherwise. By morning, Mr. Holloway was gone. His apartment, once filled with strange noises and unanswered questions, was now eerily silent. The door was slightly ajar, revealing an empty space inside. No furniture, no clutter, not even a stray piece of trash left behind. Just bare floors and blank walls, as if he had never really lived there at all. I should have felt relief. Instead, an uneasy chill crept up my spine. As I turned to head back inside, something caught my eye. A small slip of paper, taped to my door. My stomach tightened as I reached for it, the edges curling under my fingertips. The message was short, written in uneven, almost frantic handwriting. Some secrets are best left undiscovered. My hands shook as I crumpled the note. I wanted to throw it away, pretend it was nothing, but I couldn't. The landlord barely seemed to care when I asked. "Yeah, he took off in the middle of the night," he said with a shrug. "Didn't even take his deposit back, just left." But I knew better. I never saw him again. No one came looking for him. No forwarding address. No explanation. Just an empty apartment and a lingering sense of something unfinished. To this day, I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't looked through that peephole. If I had just minded my own business. Maybe some questions don't have answers. Maybe some neighbors are better left alone. The first time my neighbor, Mr. Howard, asked about my brother, I didn't think much of it. He was an old man, friendly enough but forgetful. The kind who always had a story to tell, even if you weren't sure it was meant for you. I was coming home from work, the weight of my grocery bags biting into my arms when he waved from his porch. The late afternoon sun slanted across his wrinkled face, deepening the shadows under his eyes. "How's your brother doing?" he called out. I blinked. A strange question. "My sorry, what?" "Your brother," he repeated, shifting in his rocking chair, the wooden slats creaking beneath him. "Haven't seen him today." I let out a short laugh, an uneasy one. "You must be thinking of someone else," I said, adjusting my grip on the bags. "I don't have a brother, Mr." Howard furrowed his brow, his expression thoughtful, puzzled. "Huh," he murmured. "That's odd." A gust of wind rattled the dry leaves along the pavement, and for some reason I felt the urge to get inside, to put a locked door between myself and the conversation. I brushed it off. Maybe he had me mixed up with another tenant. I lived alone, had for years. I was certain that no long-lost siblings had magically appeared in my life, but the next time I saw him, he asked again. It was early morning. The world was still wrapped in mist, the air thick with the scent of damp earth. I was locking my door when I heard his voice drift across the stillness. "Heading out early today?" "Yeah," I said, rubbing my eyes. "Got a long day ahead." He nodded, rocking back and forth in his chair. "Then your brother already left." My fingers froze on the lock. I turned slowly. "Mr. Howard, I told you, I don't have a brother." He frowned, rubbing his chin with calloused fingers. "But I saw him. Tall guy, dark hair. He waved at me from your window the other night." The morning air suddenly felt too cold. A shiver crawled up my spine, digging icy fingers into my skin. "My apartment," I said carefully, "is on the second floor." Mr. Howard just stared at me, his eyes reflecting something I couldn't name, something that made my stomach twist. I forced a chuckle. "Must have been a trick of the light. I live alone." He didn't argue, but his gaze followed me as I walked away. After that, I tried to ignore it. But over the next few weeks, he kept bringing it up. Casual mentions in passing. "Saw your brother heading out with you yesterday. He's quiet, isn't he? You two must be close." Each time I corrected him. Each time he gave me the same puzzled look, like I was the one who was mistaken. Then he got specific. "I heard you two laughing last night," he said one evening as I checked my mailbox. I stiffened. "Laughing? Yeah, sounded like a good time." I hadn't laughed last night. I hadn't spoken to anyone. I had been alone. A creeping unease settled in my gut, heavy and sour. Maybe Mr. Howard was confused. Maybe his mind was slipping. But something about the certainty in his voice, the casual way he described things that weren't possible, made my skin prickle. Then came the knocking. One night, around 2 a.m. I woke up to the sound of someone knocking on my bedroom door. From the inside, my eyes flew open. The dark was thick, suffocating. My breath hitched in my throat, pulse hammering against my ribs. I lay there, frozen, ears straining, silence. I told myself I had imagined it. A leftover sound from a dream. But when I stepped outside the next morning, Mr. Howard gave me a knowing smile. "Bit late for visitors, huh?" My stomach turned to ice. "What do you mean?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Heard someone knocking over and over last night," he said, nodding toward my apartment. "Figured your brother locked himself out or something." My hands felt numb. I didn't respond. I couldn't. That was when I decided to check the security camera in the hallway. The footage was grainy but clear enough, from 2 a.m. to 2:15 a.m. The only thing it showed was my closed bedroom door. No one had been there. That night, I barely slept. I left my bedroom light on, kept my phone clutched in my hand, waiting. Nothing happened. No knocks. No sounds. But somehow that made it worse. The next morning, groggy and disoriented, I stumbled into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked up at the mirror. There were handprints on the glass, too high to be mine. That was when I stopped sleeping at home. I stayed with a friend, making excuses about plumbing issues. But when I finally returned, the air in my apartment felt wrong. Thick, heavy, like someone had been there in my absence. That night, I lay in bed, exhausted but unable to close my eyes. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind against the window sent jolts of fear down my spine. Then, The mattress dipped beside me, like someone had just sat down. I stopped breathing. The weight was real. Pressing down. Inescapable. Slowly, my fingers trembled toward my phone. I turned on the flashlight, nothing but my bedsheets. The fabric was pressed down, an undeniable indentation, like someone had been sitting there, watching me sleep. I moved out the next day. I never told Mr. Howard why. But when I passed him, hauling the last of my boxes to my car, he gave me a small nod, like he understood. As I pulled away, I chanced one last glance at my apartment window, and I swear someone was standing there, waving. It started with a song, a lullaby so beautiful, so haunting, I couldn't stop listening. But I should have, because now I hear it even when she's not singing. And I think it's singing back to me. Last Tuesday night, I first heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind slipping through the cracks in my window, soft, melodic, almost like a whisper. But there was a pattern, a rhythm, like someone humming a tune just under their breath. I was at my desk, the pale glow of my laptop screen flickering as I typed. The hum wove through the silence, low and sweet, curling around me like a warm breath against my ear. It was so faint that I almost ignored it. Almost. I stopped typing. Listened. Who sings this late? I turned toward the window, my pulse quickening. The sound was coming from the apartment next door. The window was open, and through the thin curtains I could make out a figure. A woman. Samantha. I'd seen her before, passing in the hall or by the mailboxes, but we'd never really talked. She always seemed distant, detached, like someone who belonged more to the shadows than the world around her. The melody continued, rising and falling in a hypnotic loop. My chest tightened. The notes were wrong, not off-key, not broken, just unnatural. Like something ancient, something no human voice should be able to produce. The more I listened, the more I noticed she wasn't just humming. She was repeating words, the same ones over and over in a language I didn't recognize. They slipped into my ears like oil, thick and sticky, refusing to let go. Then silence. The air in the room seemed to press against me as if the walls were breathing. Samantha turned. Slowly. Too slowly. I ducked down, my back pressed against the wall, my breath shallow. My heart pounded so hard I was afraid she'd hear it. I squeezed my eyes shut, counted the beats of my pulse, tried to convince myself I was imagining things. And then the humming started again. Only this time it wasn't coming from her window. It was right behind me. I saw Samantha the next day by the mailboxes. She was fumbling with her keys, her long dark hair half hiding her face. My hands felt clammy, but I forced myself to speak. "Hey, I hope this isn't weird, but I heard you singing last night. What language was that?" She froze. Slowly, she turned to face me, her brow furrowed. "Singing. Yeah, around midnight. It was beautiful, but I didn't recognize the words." Her face didn't change. No flicker of recognition. No embarrassment at being caught. Just quiet confusion, then something else. "That wasn't me." A chill rolled down my spine. I let out a nervous laugh. "Right, good one." She didn't smile. "I'm serious," she whispered. "I thought that was you." The air suddenly felt colder. I tried to play it off, to smile like it was nothing. But the way she was looking at me, wide-eyed, lips slightly parted, like she was afraid to breathe, made my stomach drop. Neither of us spoke. The silence stretched too long, pressing in like something unseen was listening, waiting. Then, somewhere in the distance, I heard it. A soft, lilting hum. I didn't turn around. I couldn't, because this time it was coming from right behind me. I woke up again. Third night in a row. At first, I thought it was just a dream, one of those half-formed sounds your mind tricks you into hearing. But no, it was real, soft, melodic, drifting through the walls, that same haunting tune. I held my breath, listening, my skin prickled. The air felt thick, charged with something I couldn't name. Slowly, I sat up, my heart hammering. I turned toward the window. The apartment across the alley was dark, the curtains still. Last time I saw her, Samantha standing there, humming that strange, looping melody. But now nothing. So where was it coming from? Then realization clawed through my chest like an icy hand. The humming was coming from inside my apartment. I spun around, my throat tightened. The sound swelled closer, closer, until I could feel it vibrating in my bones. A shadow shifted in the dim hallway. I wasn't alone. My hands fumbled for my phone. Fingers trembling, I dialed Samantha. Please pick up, please pick up. My voice barely escaped in a whisper. The ringing felt endless. Then click, a groggy voice. Judith, it's like 2 and the humming stopped. Dead silence. I turned on every light in my room, my breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. You need to come over, now. I didn't wait for her answer. I couldn't. Because just before the call disconnected, I swear I heard it. That same humming. But this time, it wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from my phone. I sat on the couch, my fingers curled around a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. Judith paced in front of me, her movements sharp and restless like a caged animal. Her breath came quick, uneven. I swear it was inside, she muttered. I heard it. Something in her voice made my stomach twist. I knew that fear. I had felt it before. I know that song, I said before I could stop myself. Judith froze. Her gaze snapped to mine, wide and questioning. I hesitated, my throat tightening as memories clawed their way to the surface. I heard it when I was a kid, late at night, just like this. She swallowed hard. What is it? I exhaled slowly, feeling a cold dread settle deep in my bones. My grandmother used to say it wasn't a song, it was something calling, something old. Judith's breath hitched. The lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that stretched and shrank in unnatural ways. Then a humming, soft, right behind us. The air grew heavy, thick with something unseen, something waiting. My spine locked. I wanted to turn. I didn't want to turn. Judith reached for my arm, her fingers ice cold. Tell me you hear that. I couldn't lie. The sound was growing louder, curling through the air like a whisper meant only for us. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't human. It was something else. Then silence. A silence so deep it pressed against my ears. My pulse pounded in the void it left behind. Judith's grip on my arm tightened. Then just as suddenly a voice, singing my name. Judith woke up on the couch, her head heavy, her thoughts sluggish. The apartment was too quiet. I was gone. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, a text from me. I had to leave. Don't listen to it again. Don't answer. Just leave. Her breath shuddered out. She sat up, her pulse hammering as a draft crept through the room. The door. It was open, just slightly, just enough. A sound drifted in. Faint, familiar, a humming. Judith's lips parted. Her body went rigid. And then she mouthed the words. Like she had always known them. We found the house on a whim. The real estate agent said it was a rare find in a quiet, safe neighborhood, a cul-de-sac at the edge of town, surrounded by rows of identical homes. Aston, my husband, was thrilled. Perfect place to start fresh, he said, squeezing my hand. I wanted to believe him. After everything we'd been through, the miscarriage, the layoffs, this house felt like an offering, a promise that we could finally be happy. Our 3-year-old daughter, Lily, giggled as she ran through the empty rooms. The air smelled of fresh paint and something else, something faintly metallic. I told myself I was imagining it. It wasn't until we started unpacking that I noticed something odd. Our neighbors, each house had the same picture-perfect family, father, mother, child. They all waved politely, their smiles identical. The way they moved, their gestures, something about them felt rehearsed. I shook it off. We were new here. Maybe I was just looking too hard. The first time it happened, I thought we had just taken a wrong turn. It was supposed to be a simple errand, our first grocery run since moving into the house. The drive there was effortless, a straight shot through quiet suburban streets bathed in the golden light of the late afternoon. But on the way back, something was off. The road seemed unfamiliar, the turns. Wrong. A slow unease crept up my spine as I scanned the passing houses. Everything looked the same, too much the same. Did we pass that red mailbox before? My voice was lighter than I felt, laced with a forced casualness. Aston frowned, fingers flexing on the wheel. I don't think so. We followed the GPS, watching the blinking arrow move along the blue line. Left, then right, then straight ahead. But every time we thought we were heading away from home, the road twisted in on itself like an impossible knot. And somehow, we were back in front of our house. Every single time. I let out a short, nervous laugh. Must be a glitch. Aston's hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white. His jaw worked like he wanted to say something, but instead he exhaled sharply and shook his head. We'll try again tomorrow. But the next day it happened again. Morning sunlight streamed through the windshield, making everything look normal, ordinary. But the moment we tried to drive away, reality bent. The streets curved, the intersections looped, and no matter which route we took, no matter how random or calculated, we always ended up home. I gripped the dashboard, heart pounding in my ears. "This doesn't make sense." Aston didn't answer. His breathing had gone shallow, his fingers pressing into the wheel like he was trying to hold onto something solid. Outside, our neighbors went about their routines. The man across the street stood by his car, hose in hand, scrubbing the windshield with slow, methodical strokes. The woman next door knelt in her garden, pruning her roses with the same smooth, deliberate motions. The boy on the bike. I watched him pedal past. And then again. And then again. He circled the block with eerie precision, never looking up, never changing pace. His small frame leaned into each turn the exact same way, as if he were stuck in an invisible groove. A chill crawled over my skin. At first, I told myself they were just creatures of habit, that some people liked routine. But this wasn't routine. This was repetition, perfect, flawless repetition. And it didn't stop. Days passed, weeks. The man washed his car at the same time every morning, his arm moving in a rhythmic, mechanical arc. The woman's shears snipped in an unchanging tempo. The boy kept riding, endlessly circling, never once pausing for breath. I started watching them more closely. Their faces never changed. Their clothes never changed. The wind moved the trees, but not them. And that's when I realized they weren't living here. They were stuck here, just like us. The evening air was thick with the scent of damp earth and cut grass, the kind of quiet suburban night where the world feels still, too still. I was dragging the trash can to the curb, my mind elsewhere, when I saw her. A woman, me. She stood motionless in the neighbor's yard, bathed in the soft, flickering glow of the street lamp. The air seemed to hum around her, warping slightly at the edges, like heat rising off pavement. She wore my blue dress. Her hair fell in the same messy waves I had barely tamed that morning. But what stopped me cold, what froze me in place, was her face. She turned slowly, deliberately, as if she had been waiting for me to notice. Our eyes met. My breath hitched, my pulse hammering against my ribs. She smiled. Not a polite, passing smile. Not a neighborly acknowledgement. It was knowing. A smile with intent. A slow, curling smirk that sent a deep, primal chill down my spine. I stumbled back, my fingers numb around the trash can's handle. No, this wasn't possible. I spun on my heel, nearly tripping over my own feet as I bolted for the house. My shaking hands fumbled with the lock before I threw myself inside, slamming the door shut with enough force to rattle the frame. "Aston!" My voice came out thin, breathless. "There's someone outside. She looks just like me." Aston was on his feet in an instant, striding toward the window. He yanked back the curtain, eyes scanning the yard. "I don't see anyone." The street outside lay still beneath the glow of the lamps, empty, quiet, but I knew what I saw. I stood there, chest rising and falling in uneven gasps, my body cold with something deeper than fear. I waited for her to return. She didn't, not that night. But the next morning, as dawn bled pale light through the blinds, I peeked outside. My heart climbed into my throat. She was there, not in the same dress, not in blue. She stood in the neighbor's yard, methodically tending to the roses, just like the woman next door always did. But this time she wore a red sweater. The same red sweater I had been wearing the night before. A suffocating dread coiled around me. She was mimicking me. Or worse, she was becoming me. We tried everything. Driving in different directions. Walking. Aston even tried running through backyards, vaulting fences like a man possessed. But every path, every street, every single road led us back to the same place. Home. It was a word that should have felt safe, comforting. But now it felt like a cage. One night, desperation clawing at our throats, we made a plan. No more careful routes. No more following the GPS. We packed our bags in frantic silence, throwing clothes and supplies into duffel bags as though we were escaping a burning building. The air inside the house felt thicker, watching. At exactly midnight, we loaded Lily into her car seat and sped off, tearing through the streets like they might dissolve behind us. The road stretched ahead, endless, unfamiliar. For the first time in weeks, it felt like we were actually leaving. I didn't dare look at the clock. I didn't dare speak. Aston gripped the wheel so tight his knuckles went pale, his jaw clenched in grim determination. The tires hummed against the pavement, the dark highway unfolding in a perfect, uninterrupted stretch. 15 minutes, 30, an hour, and then headlights caught the familiar curve of our driveway. I stopped breathing. The house loomed ahead, its dark windows staring back at us. Aston's foot slammed the brakes, the car jerking to a stop. My hands trembled as I clutched the seat, my stomach bottoming out like I'd just stepped off a ledge. From the back seat, a tiny voice whispered, "We're home." My head snapped around so fast my neck cracked. "What did you say, baby?" Lily blinked up at me, her sleepy eyes unfocused, her small fingers curled around her blanket. "The house says we're home now." A cold dread slid down my spine, slow and paralyzing. I turned to Aston, but he was staring straight ahead, hands slack on the wheel. His breath came in short, uneven gasps. We didn't speak as we carried Lily inside. We didn't speak as we locked the doors. We didn't speak at all. I lay in bed that night, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling as something creaked in the walls. The house had let us leave, but only to bring us back. Aston refused to believe it. He needed a rational explanation, something to ground us, something that would make this whole nightmare normal. "Stress," he insisted, his voice tight. "We're just exhausted. Our minds are playing tricks on us." But then we saw them. Through the living room window across the street, sitting at the dinner table in the house opposite ours. Us, me, but not me. Moving with the same familiar gestures, the tilt of my head, the way I tucked my hair behind my ear. But her smile, my smile, was wrong. Too smooth, too perfect. She reached for the serving spoon and placed food onto Aston's plate. Aston, but not Aston. His mouth curled into a warm, easy grin, laughing at a joke I hadn't told. A laugh I hadn't heard in days. And then Lily, curled in her booster seat, giggling, swinging her stuffed rabbit by its floppy ear. The same stuffed rabbit that lay upstairs in the real Lily's crib. My stomach twisted. I felt sick. Aston's hand shot out, gripping mine so tightly it hurt. His face had drained of color. "We have to leave, now." We turned, ready to bolt, and froze, rows of them, lined up along the sidewalk, their silhouettes bathed in the dim glow of the street lamps. Neighbors, but not neighbors. Every single face was ours, copies, clones, reflections pulled from a warped, feverish dream. They stared at us, heads tilting in eerie synchronization. Their smiles stretched in the same unnatural way. Then, together, they spoke. "You're home." The words rang through the air, hollow and wrong. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. My throat locked, my breath trapped in my lungs as cold, stiff fingers wrapped around my arms. The last thing I saw before darkness swallowed me was my own face, smiling back at me. Morning light streamed through the curtains. I sat up, heart hammering. Aston stirred beside me, groggy. It was just a dream. I exhaled shakily and stumbled to the bathroom. Splashing cold water on my face, I looked up at the mirror and froze. A deep gash ran across my arm, stitched together with neat black thread, just like the ones I had seen on the copies of us. I turned slowly, glancing at Aston's sleeping form. His skin, beneath his shirt, had stitches too. We never escaped. We never would. The first time my neighbor, Mrs. Olson, told me to avoid the crosswalk on Main Street, I thought she was joking. Mrs. Olson had always been a fixture of the building, the kind of neighbor who was both everywhere and nowhere at once. No one could remember exactly when she had moved in, but she had outlived most of the tenants who once called this place home. The younger residents mostly ignored her, brushing off her quiet observations as the ramblings of an old woman. The older ones, however, spoke of her in hushed tones, exchanging wary glances when her name was mentioned. "She knows things," I once overheard Mrs. Dempsey from 4C whisper to another tenant in the laundry room. "Always has. My husband swears she warned his mother about her heart attack a week before it happened." I never put much stock in the rumors, at least not until the warnings started. When Mrs. Olson spoke, it was never with urgency, but with a quiet certainty that sank into my bones like a winter chill. She never begged me to listen. She didn't have to. There was something about the way she looked at me, Something in the heavy way she sighed after I brushed her off. That made my skin crawl. The night she told me not to answer the door after midnight, her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the strap of her purse. The movement was almost imperceptible, but I caught it. Her lips pressed together as if she were swallowing words she dared not speak. And then there were her eyes, wide, glassy, filled with something that might have been fear or worse, regret. I wanted to ask her how she knew these things, if she had seen something, if she had heard something, but some part of me already knew that I wouldn't like the answer. She had stopped me outside my apartment building as I was leaving for work. A frail woman in her 70s, Mrs. Olson was the type who always had a soft smile and a story to tell. That morning, though, her expression was different, tight, almost anxious. "Don't use the crosswalk on Main today," she said. I laughed. "Why not?" "Just trust me, dear, take another route." I nodded politely, assuming it was just one of her eccentricities, and went on my way. I forgot about her warning until later that evening when I saw the flashing lights. A car had jumped the curb at the very intersection where I normally crossed. A pedestrian had been hit. They didn't make it. I told myself it was a coincidence. There was something about the way Mrs. Olson watched me that day, like she was memorizing my face, as if she wasn't sure she'd see me again. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted the strap of her purse, her knuckles pale against the worn leather. "You'll remember this one, won't you?" she asked softly, her voice thinner than usual. "You'll listen this time." A strange weight settled in my chest. Yeah, of course." Then, a week later, Mrs. Olson stopped me again. "Check your locks tonight." I frowned. "I always do." She gave me a long look. "Check them twice." She held my gaze for a long moment, then sighed. It was the kind of sigh that carried the heaviness of knowing something no one else should. "Good," she murmured, "because some doors once opened can never be shut again." The words clung to me long after she had shuffled away. They echoed in my mind as I lay in bed that night, the air thick with an unnamed dread. I told myself it was just Mrs. Olson's way, cryptic and eerie but harmless. But somewhere, deep in the marrow of my bones, I already knew the truth. This warning was different, and whatever was coming was already too close. That night, I double-checked every door and window in my apartment before bed. At around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my front doorknob jiggling. Someone was trying to get in. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the shadowed figure on the other side of the peephole. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the person was gone. That was when I started to believe her. She never explained how she knew things before they happened. She never asked for anything in return. She would simply give me a warning in her calm, gentle voice, and every single time she was right. And then last night she gave me her final warning. She stopped me at the mailboxes, her frail hands clutching the strap of her purse. Her eyes were darker than usual, sunken with worry. "Don't answer the door after midnight," she said. A chill ran down my spine. "Why?" She shook her head. "Just don't." Her words haunted me the entire evening. I stayed up, checking the clock every few minutes, waiting for midnight to come and go without incident. Then, at 12:03 a.m., the knocking started. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I sat frozen in my bed, heart pounding. My apartment was silent except for the steady rhythm of the knocking. My phone was in my hand, my thumb hovering over the emergency dial. I glanced at the peephole, but something inside me screamed not to look. The knocking came again, louder this time. My skin crawled. It wasn't the hurried knock of a neighbor or a friend. It was patient, expectant. And then something whispered my name from the other side of the door. I pressed my hands over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The whisper came again, stretched and distorted, as if whatever was outside was trying to mimic a voice they didn't quite understand. I didn't move. I didn't answer. The knocking stopped. Minutes passed, then an hour. I stayed awake until the sun rose, my muscles aching from tension. When I finally worked up the courage to check the peephole, the hallway was empty. I saw Mrs. Olson later that morning. She didn't say anything, just gave me a knowing look and a small nod before walking away. I don't know how she knew. I don't know who or what was at my door last night. But I do know one thing. I will never, ever ignore one of her warnings again. The first time I noticed something off about his apartment building, he brushed it off as paranoia. Cities were weird like that. People came and went. Buildings breathed with their own rhythm. But when the third tenant in a row moved into 3B, looking exactly like the last one, wearing the same clothes, carrying the same boxes, Louis's stomach twisted. This wasn't normal. Call me Louis. I wasn't the type to obsess over things. He barely had time between cramming for exams, working a part-time job, and figuring out how to function on 3 hours of sleep. His apartment was a mess of half-eaten takeout, open textbooks, and a coffee maker that worked harder than he did. But lately, the numbers weren't adding up. His old spiral notebook, the one where he absent-mindedly jotted down dates, had started to look like evidence. Every tenant of 3B, same move-in date, same sudden disappearance. He had tried to tell himself it was a weird coincidence, but there was something about the way the newest one turned to look at him, like he had been expecting me to ask. I should have stopped watching. I should have pulled the blinds, ignored it, gone to bed. But when you see something that doesn't make sense, something that pulls at the edges of reality, you can't just look away. Another one. That's the third tenant in 3 months. I press my forehead against the cold glass of my window, watching the newest arrival step out of a nondescript moving van. Same height, same build, even the same color jacket as the last guy. I swear, if I squint, it might as well be him. The last guy barely unpacked before he was gone, just like the one before him. A sharp gust of wind rattles the "For Rent" sign at the complex entrance, its rusted hinges whining under the flickering glow of a street lamp. The shadows stretch long and jagged across the pavement, shifting unnaturally as the light buzzes in and out. I pull away from the window and grab my notebook from the nightstand. A quick flip through the pages confirms it, each move in, each move out, perfectly spaced apart. Every single one of them vanishing after exactly 1 month. Maybe it's just a weird coincidence. But why do they all look the same? A chill skates down my spine and I shudder, shutting off the light. As I crawl into bed, I force my eyes shut, willing myself to sleep. Then, from the corner of my room, outside my window, something moves. I live on the 3rd floor. I hesitated before stepping outside. The last thing I wanted was to be that neighbor, the one who pries, who asks too many questions. But something about this wasn't normal. It wasn't just déjà vu. It was like watching a scene play out on repeat. The new tenant stood by the moving van, lifting a box identical to the ones the last guy had. Same size, same brown packing tape, even the same way he cradled it in his arms. My stomach twisted as I approached, the damp air pressing heavy against my skin. "Hey, weird question," I started, forcing my voice to sound casual. "But why do you keep moving?" The man froze mid-step. Slowly, he turned to me, eyes vacant, like he'd just woken up from a deep sleep. The silence stretched too long, making my pulse quicken. Then, in a voice that felt both distant and eerily familiar, he said, "I don't remember moving." A thick weight settled in my chest. I let out a nervous chuckle, stepping back, pretending like I hadn't just felt my blood turn cold. His head tilted slightly, just enough to be wrong. And then he just stood there, watching me. The wind howled through the parking lot, but he didn't move, didn't blink. I turned and walked away, my pace just shy of running. Something wasn't right. And whatever it was watching me too. I had been staring at my phone for 5 minutes, rereading Rachel's text over and over. Who? That unit. Been empty for months. No, that wasn't possible. I looked up, my throat suddenly dry. 3B's lights were on, bright, too bright. The kind of artificial glow that made everything feel unnatural. The curtains swayed slightly, but there was no breeze. Someone was in there. I felt it. A heavy silence pressed against the walls of my apartment, thick and suffocating, like a held breath stretched too long. Even the usual hum of the fridge seemed to recede into the void, as if the entire world had tilted into unnatural quiet. The air felt different, stagnant, charged like the stillness before a thunderclap. Then a knock, sharp, hollow, not from the door, from the window. A slow, dreadful chill bled through my veins, rooting me to the spot. My breath hitched, my lungs locking as if refusing to inhale what the darkness might carry. The hairs along my arms prickled, a deep, primal fear sinking its claws into my skin. I live on the 3rd floor. The realization settled like a stone in my gut, heavy, undeniable. My pulse pounded against my ribs, every beat a countdown to something I wasn't prepared to face. Slowly, my head turned, my movements stiff, mechanical, like I was no longer in control of my own body. My eyes locked onto the window. The glass was fogged over, a thin veil of condensation smudged by something unseen. Someone had been breathing against it. Then, just beyond the glass, caught in the corner of my vision, I saw it. A shadow, too tall, too still, watching me. A grotesque shape, just barely distinguishable from the night, its presence dripping with something unnatural, something wrong. My stomach twisted into a knot of ice. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The world around me seemed to shrink, the walls pressing closer, the air thickening with a silent, suffocating pressure. And then the knock came again. This time louder, a jarring, insistent sound that rattled the window in its frame. I wasn't alone, and whatever was in 3B it wanted in. It knew I had seen it. I shouldn't have come here. The hallway was unnervingly silent, the kind of quiet that made my own breathing sound too loud. My footsteps barely made a sound against the old wooden floor, but every step felt like it echoed, announcing my presence. 3B's door was open, just a crack. A thin sliver of darkness waited beyond. I swallowed hard. My fingers brushed against the door and it creaked as I nudged it open. The apartment smelled clean, too clean. Like fresh laundry and something chemical, something sterile. A suitcase sat in the middle of the room. Pristine, untouched. The clothes inside were neatly folded. I reached out, hesitated, then picked up a shirt. I had seen this before. Not just the brand, not just the size. The last tenant wore this, and the one before him. The closet door was slightly open, barely noticeable, but something inside shifted, breathed. A slow, steady inhale. My skin prickled. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But I had to know. I reached out and pushed the closet door open. Rows of them, bodies, no people, identical, lined up against the wall, heads tilted at the same unnatural angle, arms slack at their sides. Their faces, my face, my stomach twisted. I stumbled back, choking on my own breath. Then one of them blinked. I stood there, frozen, watching as the police moved in and out of 3B. They pulled them out, one by one. Bodies, identical, lifeless. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to tell them, to explain, but how could I? How do you explain that I spoke to them, that I watched them move in, that I watched them leave? A hand clapped onto my shoulder. I jumped. Nobody lived here for over a year, the officer said, his voice calm, careful. Who exactly did you talk to? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I turned back toward my window. 3B was dark, empty. A fresh for rent sign swayed gently in the morning breeze. And then, from the blackness of the room, I saw something move. I first heard it on a cold autumn night, a sad, wavering melody drifting through the air. The house sat at the end of our street, forgotten. No lights, no movement, and no power. But the music, soft and haunting, came from within. I hesitated at the gate, listening. It was a record, an old one, crackling and looping back as if someone was still flipping it. But no one lived there. No one had for decades. The wires had been cut. The windows were nailed shut. Yet the song continued. The first time I heard it, I thought it was a dream. A waltz, soft, sorrowful, drifting through the night like a whisper from the past. It didn't belong in this world. It felt too delicate to exist, yet too heavy to ignore. Midnight, every night. At first, I brushed it off. A neighbor's old radio, the wind weaving through the alleyways, some logical explanation waiting to be found. But logic didn't explain why the melody never changed. Why it always started at the exact same moment. Why it was getting louder. My friends dismissed it. Just an old song caught on the airwaves, they said. Probably nothing. But I knew better, so I started watching. From my bedroom window, I sat with a notebook in hand, recording every note, every subtle shift, every moment the record skipped. The pattern was there, I just couldn't see it yet. And then one night, something changed. The music faltered. A violent scratch ripped through the air, sharp, grating, like nails dragged across a record. And then nothing. For the first time, the waltz stopped. A cold, unnatural silence followed, pressing against my ears. And in that silence, something else. Footsteps, soft, slow, coming from behind me, inside my room. The air was thick with the kind of stillness that makes your skin prickle, like the world itself was holding its breath. I wasn't the only one who heard it. The waltz. That sorrowful, aching melody that bled through the cracks of the old apartment door at the end of the hall. Others whispered about it in hushed voices, glancing over their shoulders as if speaking of it too loudly might summon something. One night, a group of kids gathered near the door, daring each other to get closer. Their nervous laughter barely masked the unease in their eyes. I should have walked away, but instead I stayed. I followed. The hallway light flickered above us, casting long, warped shadows on the peeling wallpaper. The melody hummed through the wood, distant yet suffocating, as if the door itself was breathing in time with it. One of the kids pressed an ear against the surface, his face paling. I knocked, soft at first, then harder. No answer. Someone gripped the handle and twisted. Locked. Then, so faint I thought I imagined it, a whisper drifted from the other side. "Let it play." The voice wasn't human. It was wrong, stretched like 100 voices speaking in unison from the bottom of a well. The melody skipped, stuttered. And in that frozen second, the hallway felt too dark, too quiet. The silence carried weight, like something unseen had just turned its gaze toward us. Then, without another thought, we ran. The music continued behind us, uninterrupted. But now, it felt like it was following. I couldn't let it go. Curiosity had turned into something deeper, an ache that gnawed at the edges of my mind, refusing to be ignored. The melody haunted me even in silence, lingering in the corners of my thoughts like an echo of something forgotten, or something waiting. One night I gave in, alone. The air was thick, heavy, as if the night itself was trying to hold me back. My hands trembled as I gripped the crowbar, its cold metal biting into my skin. The house loomed before me, dark and lifeless, its windows like empty eyes. I found the back window. The wood groaned under my weight as I pried it open, the sound too loud in the stillness. A rush of stale air met me, thick with dust and something else. Something wrong. Inside, the darkness swallowed me whole. Every step kicked up clouds of dust, swirling in the moonlight like disturbed ghosts. The air smelled of rot and time left to wither. White sheets covered the furniture, draped like forgotten bodies, unmoving, untouched for years. And then in the center of the room, I saw it. The record player. The needle scratched against nothing. An empty turntable, spinning, but the music played anyway. Soft, sorrowful. And then the needle lifted. Someone lifted it, and the music stopped. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my throat. The room felt smaller, the air pressing against me, thick with dust and something unseen. The waltz wasn't just playing, it was inside me now, threading through my thoughts like a memory that wasn't mine. Then movement, a ripple in the shadows. My pulse slammed against my ribs as I turned. There, sitting in the armchair. It wasn't there before. I was sure it wasn't there before. The figure was faded, like a smudged reflection on glass, its form flickering at the edges. But I could see the tilt of its head, the slow, deliberate way its long fingers hovered over the record player. It wasn't touching anything. And yet the scratching stopped. The silence that followed was wrong, not empty but watching, holding its breath, waiting for me to do something. Then a whisper. Low, dry, threading through the silence like a crack in the air. "Let it play!" My stomach lurched, my knees locked, the needle dropped. The song began again, soft, slow. Wrapping around me like a hand, curling around my throat. I fled, I never went back, but the music never stopped. It followed me home, played in my dreams. It hummed through the floorboards, waiting for me to listen. The song would never end, because someone, something, was still waiting to hear it one last time. I first noticed them on a Monday morning. Tiny, unblinking red lights dotting the side of my neighbor's house. At first, I thought nothing of it, just another person getting a security system, an all too common sight in today's world. But then I saw where they were pointed. Not at his driveway, not at his front door. Every single one faced my home. My name is Joshua. I live alone in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where people water their lawns in the morning and wave to each other from their driveways. The kind of place where strange things aren't supposed to happen. But something was very, very wrong with my neighbor. At first, I told myself it was paranoia. Maybe the angles were weird, and they just happened to be pointing in my direction. Maybe I was overthinking it. But that illusion shattered when I saw my neighbor, Mr. Lawson, sitting on his porch, staring at his phone, his eyes glued to the screen with eerie fascination. I walked over, trying to keep my voice light. "Hey, I couldn't help but notice your cameras. They all seem to be pointed at my house." Lawson looked up at me with an unsettling smile. "Just keeping an eye on things." Something about the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It wasn't just paranoia. It was heavy, pressing against my skin like unseen fingertips tracing my spine. The air in my bedroom felt too still, too expectant. I yanked my curtains shut, but it didn't help. I knew those cameras were still there, unblinking, recording, observing. Sleep was out of the question. My thoughts twisted around the unsettling realization, around the dozens of tiny red lights I'd seen glinting in the dark, all pointed at me. Curiosity won. Around midnight, I stepped outside, my breath fogging in the cold. The silence felt unnatural, as if the night itself was listening. My pulse thudded as I reached the side of Lawson's house, tracing the thick black cables snaking along the siding. And that's when I saw it. The wires weren't leading to some security hub. They weren't part of a system meant to protect. They led straight into his house. My stomach clenched. This wasn't about security. He wasn't just recording my home. He was watching it. Live, I barely slept. By morning, the unease had settled into something worse, an itch beneath my skin, an urgency that wouldn't let go. I had to ask, so I knocked. Lawson answered almost immediately, as if he'd been expecting me. His face was blank, unreadable, the kind of stillness that made my skin crawl. I forced my voice to stay even. "Lawson, I need to ask, why are your cameras all pointed at my house?" A beat of silence, then another. His lips barely moved when he spoke. "I don't have any cameras." The world seemed to tilt. I opened my mouth, ready to argue, to tell him I'd seen them, trace the wires myself, but something in his expression stopped me cold. His eyes weren't confused. They were knowing, daring me to push further. A slow, creeping chill wrapped around my spine. I swallowed hard, stepping back. "Right, sorry to bother you." He didn't reply, just watched as I turned and walked away, every step feeling heavier than the last. As I reached my door, I had the sudden, sickening realization I'd never seen him put the cameras up. I'd never seen him adjust them, and I'd never seen them move. But somehow they were always watching. The next morning, I saw it. A new addition to Lawson's house. A single camera. This one was different, larger, more advanced, mounted directly above his porch. The lens was angled up, pointed straight at my bedroom window. A fresh wave of nausea curled in my gut. This wasn't just unsettling anymore, it was deliberate. A silent message. I stopped sleeping. Every rustle outside sent my heart hammering. Shadows shifted wrong, stretching too far under the streetlights. My blinds stayed shut, but it didn't matter. I could feel the camera's unblinking eye on me. I was being watched, studied, but why? Panic gnawed at my ribs. I needed help. I called the police. They sent an officer out, a tired-looking man with a clipboard and an impatient sigh. I stayed behind the curtain, watching as he knocked on Lawson's door. Lawson answered immediately, as if he'd been waiting. He spoke calmly, the same vacant smile stretched across his face. The officer gestured toward the camera. I couldn't hear their words, but I saw Lawson's lips move. A casual explanation, a dismissive shrug. A moment later, the officer turned back toward his car, already shaking his head. I stepped outside before he could drive off. "Well," I asked, breath hitching in my throat. He sighed, tucking his notepad away. "He says the cameras are for his own security. They're facing his property, not yours. Legally, there's nothing we can do." I stared at him. "That one is pointed directly at my window." The officer hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "Listen, I get that it's unsettling, but unless he's trespassing or recording inside your home, we can't make him take it down." That was it. That was all they were willing to do. I was on my own. The officer left, gravel crunching beneath his tires, and I stood there in the morning sun, feeling smaller than I ever had before. I turned back to Lawson's house, my skin prickling. He was still standing in his doorway, still smiling. But this time, his head was tilted ever so slightly, like he was listening, like he was waiting. And then, as if he knew I was watching, he lifted a hand, just 2 fingers, and gave the smallest, slowest wave. I backed into my house and locked the door. That night, I couldn't bring myself to open the blinds, but at 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. A motion alert, from my own security camera. With shaking hands, I opened the app. The footage loaded, dark, grainy, silent. And then I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of my yard, not moving, not coming closer, just watching. And in the dim glow of the street lamp, I saw the glint of something in his hands. A camera, pointed directly at me. The following week, I decided I'd had enough. If the police wouldn't do anything, I would. I bought a ladder, waited until Lawson's car was gone, and climbed up to inspect the camera mounted above his porch. I reached out to disconnect it, but then I saw something that made my blood run cold. The lens moved. It wasn't a static camera. It was tracking me. I scrambled down the ladder, my breath coming in sharp gasps. I ran back inside and locked the door, pressing my back against it as if that would somehow keep me safe. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Don't touch the cameras." I froze. My heart pounded against my ribs, my fingers trembled as I typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Then the reply came. "You're on camera." I ran to my windows and yanked the curtains shut. My hands were slick with sweat. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police again. This time, my voice shook as I told them someone was watching me, that I was receiving threats. They arrived within 20 minutes, but by the time they knocked on Lawson's door, the cameras were gone. Every single one. Lawson stepped outside, looking at me with mock concern. "Everything okay, Joshua?" I could barely breathe. He knew. He had to know. The police left after giving me a tired warning about wasting their time. That night, I barely slept. When I did, I had nightmares of red blinking lights watching me from the shadows. Morning came, weak and pale, as if the sun itself was reluctant to rise. I stepped outside, trying to pretend everything was normal, that the previous night hadn't hollowed me out with dread. The air was crisp, but it did nothing to settle the unease curling in my gut. Then I saw it. A package, sitting on my doorstep. No label, no return address. A cold weight settled in my chest. I scanned the street. No one, just the quiet hum of morning life, birds chirping. A distant car engine. But I felt it, that wrongness clinging to the air like something rotten just beneath the surface. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. Solid, deliberate. Inside, my kitchen felt too small, the walls pressing in as I set the box on my table. I took a slow, steady breath and opened it. A single USB drive, nothing else. My throat tightened. I stared at it for too long, my mind already racing through possibilities, none of them good. I should throw it away, burn it, forget it. But I couldn't. With a deep breath, I plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered to life. Video files, dozens of them, no names, just timestamps. I scrolled to the most recent one, hesitated, then clicked. The footage loaded, grainy, black and white, like it had been recorded from an old surveillance system. My house, my windows, my front door. A sick realization slithered through me. This wasn't just some random video. It was me. Then movement. A figure, not standing on the sidewalk. Not across the street, but in my yard, watching me, and it was Lawson. A cold shudder ran through me. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, its head tilted slightly as if studying me through the glass. The timestamp was from last night, 3:12 a.m. The exact time my phone had buzzed. The exact time I had checked my own security camera. The exact time I had seen someone standing there, holding a camera of their own. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. My stomach twisted. My skin burned cold. This wasn't about Lawson watching me. Someone else was watching both of us, and Lawson, he knew. That night, for the first time in weeks, I left my house. I drove aimlessly, just needing to be anywhere but there. When I finally returned, I felt the eyes on me before I even stepped out of the car. I turned slowly. Lawson stood on his porch, phone in hand, watching me. This time, he didn't smile. He raised his phone, tilted the screen toward me, and played the video, a live feed, of me standing in my driveway, but the camera wasn't in my house. It was behind me. I first noticed him on a Tuesday. It was one of those gray, unremarkable days where nothing significant should have happened. I locked my apartment, turned around, and saw him, the man across the hall. He was locking his door at the exact same time. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But then, when I walked to the elevator, he followed. When I reached for the button, his hand hovered near the same one. And when the doors closed, I saw something in the reflection. He wasn't just standing near me. He was standing exactly like me. I'm Belinda. A simple name, a simple life. I work a 9-to-5 job at a local publishing house. My biggest problems were deadlines and whether to order takeout or cook dinner. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to be afraid in my own home. But then, he happened. It started small. Little things, easily dismissed in the way the mind smooths over oddities to maintain normalcy. Coincidences, I told myself. Nothing to worry about. I'd leave my apartment at exactly 7:30 a.m. He'd do the same. A few steps behind. Maybe he just had the same schedule. Maybe it was normal. But then the mailbox. I'd head down to check mine, and there he was, already there, always there. Fingers drifting through envelopes that had no names, no addresses, just blank, unmarked paper. His movements were sluggish, deliberate, like he wasn't really reading, just waiting. A shiver ran down my spine. I told myself I was imagining it. That paranoia was curling its fingers around my thoughts, warping them into something sinister, until it got worse. The glances. The almost too long moments where I caught him in my periphery, hovering at the edges of my vision like a shadow that didn't quite belong. Always a step behind. Not close enough to call it stalking, but never far enough to dismiss it as chance. Then the real horror began. One morning, I stepped out of my apartment and froze. He was there, standing by the elevator, waiting. My stomach twisted into knots, a slow, queasy churn of dread. My breath shallowed, every muscle in my body screaming at me to turn back, to lock my door, to pretend I never saw him. And then I noticed his clothes. The same as mine, not similar, exact. Black boots, navy blue jacket, a worn-out cuff on the sleeve. The same tiny rip in the denim near the shoulder. My mouth went dry. The hallway lights flickered, buzzing faintly overhead. The air felt thick, dense with an unspoken wrongness. I swallowed hard, forcing myself forward. Maybe it was a joke. A cruel, silent mockery. I pressed the elevator button. So did he. His knuckles brushed mine, cold and dry like paper left too long in the dark. A slow, crawling revulsion coiled in my stomach. I pulled away as if I'd touched something rotten, something dead. My pulse slammed against my ribs. His eyes never left me. Heavy, expectant, waiting for something I didn't understand. The doors slid open with a hollow chime. I hesitated. His lips parted just slightly. No words, no sound. Just the shape of something unsaid forming in the dark hollow of his mouth. That was enough. I turned and bolted for the stairs. My feet hit the steps hard, taking them two at a time, nearly stumbling in my blind, desperate need to put space between us. My own ragged breathing filled my ears, a frantic, uneven rhythm. Second floor. First. I burst through the stairwell door, gasping, lungs burning. The lobby was empty. Too empty. I spun, expecting to see him following, but he wasn't there. The stairwell was silent, too silent, like it had swallowed him whole. And then the camera. The security camera in the corner. Its little red light was off. Dead. A chill slithered up my spine. Someone had turned it off. And if the cameras weren't working, then I was the only one who saw him. The next few days were a game of cat and mouse, except I wasn't sure which one I was. I tested my theory, adjusting my routine in subtle but deliberate ways. Waking up an hour earlier, slipping out before the sky turned fully blue. Taking the long way home, weaving through unfamiliar streets, doubling back just to be sure I wasn't being followed. I even changed my clothes, gray instead of navy, sneakers instead of boots. Small shifts, little differences, enough to throw someone off. But it didn't matter. He adapted. I spotted him outside the cafe I sometimes stopped at, just standing, waiting, his clothes identical, not just the colors, not just the style, the details. The cuff of his jeans folded the same way, a slight smudge of ink on the back of his hand, right where mine was, as if he had copied it stroke for stroke. A slow, sickening realization settled over me like a second skin. He wasn't just following me. He was studying me, mimicking. I pushed further. Small experiments, little tests. I picked up my phone at random times throughout the day. And every time, without fail, he did too. Lifting it to his ear, nodding, responding, except his screen was black. No call, no sound. And yet he nodded anyway, his mouth moving in silent agreement, as if answering a conversation that didn't exist. A chill slithered through my ribs, coiling in my gut like something alive. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, that I was paranoid. Seeing things that weren't there, until the whispering started. Late one night, just as my mind was slipping into that hazy in-between space before sleep, I heard it. Soft, muffled, coming from the hallway outside my apartment, a voice. I sat up, my breath stilled in my chest, my skin tight with a crawling dread. I crept toward the door, pulse hammering in my ears, pressing my ear against the wood. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to stop. And then I heard it, my own voice, not an echo. Not a recording. Someone was whispering my thoughts, word for word. The exact words running through my mind. My stomach dropped. A slow, deep horror spread through my limbs, rooting me in place. I stumbled back, hands trembling, my lungs dragging in shallow, uneven breaths. The walls around me felt too close. The air too thick, my body no longer my own. Then the whispering stopped. Silence. A beat. Then a knock 3 times, soft, deliberate, almost patient. My fingers fumbled for my phone, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. And then I saw it. My phone's screen, still locked, but a message had just appeared. No number, no sender, just 3 words. Let me in. I couldn't sleep. I barely ate. Every moment in my apartment felt like a trap, a cage where I was being watched, studied. My reflection was no longer my own because somewhere, just across the hall, he was becoming me. I decided to confront him. The next morning, I waited by my door. When he stepped out, I stepped forward. "Who are you?" He smiled. "Belinda." The world tilted. "No," I stammered. "That's my name." His head tilted, eyes dark and amused. "I know." I ran to the landlord, demanding answers. She paled at the mention of his apartment. "That unit has been empty for 6 months." I shook my head violently. "No, someone lives there. He looks just like me. He knows my thoughts." Her lips trembled. "That's not possible. The last tenant, he was obsessed with the neighbor across the hall. He mimicked their life until..." I leaned in. "Until what?" She hesitated. "Until they disappeared." I packed my bags that night. As I locked my door one final time, I turned to face his apartment. The door was open. Inside, my reflection stared back at me from the darkness. And then it stepped forward. I ran. I never looked back. But sometimes, when I catch my reflection in a window, I wonder, did I escape? Or did he take my place? The first time I noticed something was wrong, it wasn't the missing house. It was the silence. The kind that felt too deep, like the air had been sucked out of the world. No birds chirping. No distant hum of lawnmowers or passing cars, just a thick, pressing quiet that made my skin prickle. Then I saw it. Or rather, I didn't see it. The house at the end of the street, the blue one with the red door and the swing set, was gone. Not demolished. Not abandoned. Just erased. But I remembered it. And when I asked my neighbor about it, she looked at me like I had lost my mind. "There's never been a house there, dear." Her words left a hollow ache in my chest, because I knew she was wrong. And worse, deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, something told me that if I kept asking questions, I might disappear too. My name is Deborah. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing ever happens. We have the usual neighborhood watch meetings, the occasional garage sale, and kids riding their bikes up and down the street. It's the kind of place where you expect things to remain the same for years, except something changed. I was sipping my morning coffee when I noticed it. The house at the end of the street, the big blue one with the red door and the swing set, was gone. Just gone. There wasn't an empty lot, no sign of demolition, no debris. It was as if it had never been there at all, but I remembered it. I remembered the elderly couple who lived there, Mr. and Mrs. Langley. I remembered their flower garden and how they always gave out the best Halloween candy. I stood on my porch, staring at the vacant space where the house should have been. Something in my gut told me not to say anything, but curiosity won over. I walked to my neighbor, Mrs. Simmons, watering her plants. "Hey, did something happen to the Langley's house?" I asked. Mrs. Simmons looked at me blankly. "Who?" "The Langleys, the couple at the end of the street." She frowned, lowering the hose. "Deborah, there's never been a house there." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "That's not possible. I've lived here for 10 years. I know that house was there." Mrs. Simmons sighed, giving me a look reserved for those who needed a nap or a doctor. "Maybe you're thinking of somewhere else, dear." But I was, and I knew it. I spent the rest of the day trying to figure it out. I asked more neighbors, but none of them remembered the house. I even checked my phone for old pictures, but every image I had of our street showed nothing but an empty lot at the end. I went to the city records office, but there was no listing of the Langley house. No deed, no blueprints, nothing. It was as if the house and the people in it had never existed. And then I started forgetting things. At first, it was little things. My grocery list, my car keys, the name of my third-grade teacher. Then, bigger things, my childhood home's address, my first pet's name, the date of my wedding anniversary. It felt like something was siphoning pieces of my memory, replacing them with a void. One night, I woke up drenched in sweat, panting. I had dreamed about the house, about standing in front of it and knocking on the red door. Someone had answered. But their face, it was blurred, shifting like static on an old television screen. And behind them, the house was dark, cavernous, and endless. I woke up before I could step inside. Desperate for answers, I visited the local library, digging into old newspapers, but found nothing. It was as if history had been rewritten. Then one evening, I saw a flicker of movement where the house used to be. A shadow standing in the empty lot, watching. My skin prickled. It didn't move, didn't shift. It was just there. The next morning, I forgot my own mother's name. I stopped talking about the house after that. I stopped asking questions. I forced myself to let it go because I had a feeling that the more I searched for answers, the more I would lose. And then my neighbor, Paul, knocked on my door. His face was pale, his hands trembling. "Deborah," he whispered. "Wasn't there a yellow house next to mine?" My stomach dropped. I stepped outside and looked where he was pointing. There was nothing there, and I didn't remember. The first time I met him, it was by accident. I was taking out the trash when I noticed the old man standing by the fence that separated our yards. His posture was stiff, like an old tree weathered by time, his hands trembling slightly as they clutched a cane. His eyes, however, were sharp, dark, and filled with something I couldn't quite place. "You're back," he said, his voice gravelly but steady. I hesitated. "Sorry." The old man's lips curled into a knowing smile. "You always were a quiet one, weren't you? But I suppose time changes people." A chill ran down my spine. I think you have me mistaken for someone else. I just moved here. His brow furrowed slightly, but he didn't look confused. He looked sad. No, no, he muttered, shaking his head. You were born here, weren't you? In the little blue house by the creek. Your mother used to bring you by, just a toddler back then, always wearing that red cap. You used to call me. Stop. My voice came out sharper than I intended. I wasn't born here. I just moved in last month. I don't know you. The old man sighed, as if disappointed. Time plays tricks on the mind, he murmured. Or maybe it plays tricks on you. I turned away quickly, my heart hammering in my chest as I hurried back inside. The conversation left a sour taste in my mouth, an unease I couldn't shake. That night, I dreamed of a blue house by a creek. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding. The details of the dream were already slipping away, but the sensation of familiarity lingered. The sound of running water, the scent of damp earth, the feeling of tiny hands pulling a red cap over my head, it all felt so real. I told myself it was just my brain playing tricks, influenced by what the old man had said. But the unease never left me. Days passed, and I avoided my neighbor. Every time I stepped outside, I felt his eyes on me, watching from his porch. He never called out to me again, but the weight of his gaze was enough to keep me on edge. Then, one evening, I found something in my mailbox. A photograph. It was old, its edges worn and yellowed. In the picture, a little boy stood in front of a blue house, grinning widely. He was wearing a red cap. My hands trembled as I flipped the photo over. Scrawled on the back in shaky handwriting was a date, 26 years ago. And a name. My name. I dropped the photo as if it had burned me. My breath came in shallow gasps. This wasn't possible. It had to be a trick, a sick joke. But deep down, something inside me whispered that it was. The old man had known. He had always known. And somehow so had I. I stood frozen, my mind racing. 26 years ago, that would mean no, it wasn't possible. I wasn't born here. My parents had never mentioned this place. Had they? A deep unease settled in my stomach. I needed answers. I grabbed the photo and marched to the old man's house, my pulse hammering in my ears. He answered the door before I could even knock, as if he had been expecting me. You remember now, don't you? His voice was quiet, patient. I shoved the photograph toward him. What is this? Where did you get it? He sighed, stepping back. Come inside. Everything in me screamed not to go in, but I did. His house smelled of dust and time. The walls were lined with shelves of books and framed photos. As I scanned the images, my stomach dropped. They weren't just pictures of him, there were pictures of me, as a child, in different places, some I recognized, some I didn't. This doesn't make sense, I whispered. He nodded. It doesn't, not at first. Who are you? My voice shook. His expression softened. I told you I'm someone who knew you, a long time ago, before you left. Left where? I demanded. He hesitated. Before they took you. My blood ran cold. Who? He gestured toward a dusty wooden box on his table. With shaking hands, I lifted the lid. Inside, there were more photographs, newspaper clippings, articles about a missing child. My name, my face, missing since age 4. My vision swam. No, this isn't real. I tried to tell you, he said softly. But they don't like it when you remember. Who? I asked again, my voice barely above a whisper. The room seemed to darken. The house groaned as if something inside its walls was shifting. The old man's gaze flickered to the window. They're already here, he murmured. A sudden knock at the door made me jump. It was soft, rhythmic, too deliberate to be anything but intentional. I turned back to the old man. Who is that? His face was pale. They always come when one of us gets too close to the truth. I stepped backward. I need to go. He grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. If you leave now, you'll forget again. I wrenched my arm free. The knocking grew louder. I ran. Out the door, down the street, away from that house, away from that man, away from the impossible things he was saying. I didn't stop running until I was safely locked inside my own home. The next morning, I forced myself to go back, but the house was empty. The curtains were drawn, the windows coated in dust. For rent sign was posted on the door. I asked around. The neighbor across the street frowned at me. That house has been abandoned for years. I shook my head. No, that's not possible. The old man... What old man? I felt dizzy. You must be mistaken, the neighbor said kindly. Nobody lived there since the last tenant disappeared. That was, must be over 20 years ago now. A sick, hollow feeling filled my stomach. I never found the photograph again. I never saw the old man again. And worst of all, I stopped dreaming about the blue house by the creek, just like he said I would. It started with a sound, a faint, high-pitched wail drifting through the thin walls of my apartment at night. At first, I barely noticed it. The hum of city life made strange noises common. The pipes groaned, the wind whistled through unseen cracks, and sometimes neighbors had their TV volume a little too high. But this was different. The crying was soft, distant, almost muffled, like a baby sobbing into a pillow. It would last for a few minutes, then stop so suddenly it felt like someone had pressed a mute button on reality. I tried to ignore it. People had guests over. Maybe my neighbor, Roland, was babysitting. But something about the way the sound cut off so abruptly made my stomach twist. Then came the worst part. One night I stood by the wall, listening. The baby's cries grew louder. My pulse quickened, and then I heard something else. A lullaby. A woman's voice, whispering a tune in a language I didn't recognize. It was soothing, but something about it made my skin crawl. It wasn't comforting. It felt empty, like a voice singing to nothing. The next day, I ran into Roland in the hallway. He was an older man, maybe in his late 50s, with tired eyes and a permanent frown. I hesitated before asking. "Hey, I was just wondering, were you babysitting last night? I heard a baby crying." He turned to me slowly, his face blank. "What baby?" My mouth went dry. "The one I keep hearing at night." Roland's expression didn't change. If anything, his frown deepened. "I live alone," he said flatly, "and I don't hear anything." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Oh, maybe it's coming from another apartment." Roland exhaled sharply, as if debating whether to say something. Then, in a voice so low I almost missed it, he muttered, "The last tenant said the same thing." I stared at him. "What?" But he was already walking away, his shoulders stiff, his hands clenched into fists. The night stretched on, heavy with the kind of silence that made every creak of the floorboards feel deafening. The air in my room was thick, oppressive, like the walls were pressing in just a little too close. And then, at exactly 2:13 a.m., the crying began. It wasn't soft. It wasn't distant. It was right there, bleeding through the wall, raw and broken. Each sob curled around my ribs like cold fingers, squeezing the air from my lungs. Whoever it was, whatever it was suffering. I moved closer, my bare feet soundless against the carpet. My breath hitched as I pressed my ear to the wall. The surface was unnaturally cool, a stark contrast to the heat creeping along the back of my neck. My fingers shook as I lifted my phone and opened the recording app. I pressed record, and the crying stopped. A dead silence swallowed the room, so heavy it made my ears ring. My pulse pounded against my temples, loud enough that for a brief, horrifying second, I wondered if it could hear me too. And then a knock, not at my door, on the wall, right where my ear had been. I recoiled so fast my vision blurred, my body moving on instinct. My phone slipped from my grip, landing with a muffled thud. My breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. Another knock, slower, heavier, deliberate, like it was waiting for me to answer. My fingers scrambled for my phone, nails scraping against the carpet. I hit playback. Static. A hollow, empty hum, no crying, no knocking. Just the dead air of a recording that should have captured something. But it didn't. And that meant it hadn't come from inside the walls. It had come from inside my room. Morning brought a weak sense of normalcy, the kind that barely clung to reality, but was enough to keep me from spiraling. The sun filtering through my blinds was too bright, the birds outside chirping just a little too cheerfully, like the world was desperate to convince me that nothing was wrong. I latched onto that illusion, convinced myself that I was just sleep-deprived, that my mind had twisted the silence of the night into something sinister, that I had only imagined the crying, the knocking, the absence of sound on my recording. But then I saw the door, Roland's door. The wood was ruined, deep, jagged gashes carved into the bottom half, long and uneven, as if something with small, frantic hands had tried to claw its way out. The grooves splintered outward, almost desperate, like whatever had done it had grown more frantic the longer it scratched. A cold weight settled in my stomach. I knocked. No answer. I sucked in a breath and forced down the uneasy feeling coiling in my gut. It could have been an old pet, I reasoned. Maybe the damage had always been there and I just never noticed. My own mind was already primed for fear. I couldn't trust it. Still, as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling of something watching from the other side of that door. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my body stiff beneath the covers. The house was quiet, a silence so thick it felt like the walls were holding their breath. I wasn't expecting to hear the crying again. I wasn't expecting to hear the lullaby, but what I did hear was worse. Laughter, a child's giggle, soft, playful, close, right outside my bedroom door, the kind of laughter that didn't belong in an empty house. I gripped the sheets tighter, holding my breath as the giggling faded into silence. My bedroom door remained shut, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was standing just beyond it, waiting. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I knocked on Roland's door again, harder this time. I pressed my ear to the wood, listening for any sign of movement, any rustle of life behind it. Nothing. But the scratches, they were worse. The jagged claw marks had stretched higher, reaching nearly to the doorknob. I stepped back, pulse hammering, and forced myself to think rationally. Maybe Roland had a cat. Maybe he had a breakdown and did this himself. Maybe I'm losing my mind, but deep down I knew this wasn't normal. That night the lullaby returned. It started at exactly 2:13 a.m., soft and sickly sweet, like a child's breath against my ear. But this time it was inside my apartment. I sat up, rigid, my throat tightening as the melody drifted through the dark. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling as I turned on the flashlight. The beam wavered, cutting through the shadows, but my room was empty. Then tap. A tiny, deliberate knock against the closet door. I nearly dropped my phone. My pulse roared in my ears as I slowly turned my head toward the sound. Tap, tap, something was inside. The air in my lungs turned to ice. The handle of the closet door gleamed under my flashlight, unmoving. But I felt it. I felt something on the other side, waiting, listening. Summoning every ounce of willpower, I reached out, fingers shaking, and grabbed the handle. I wrenched the door open, expecting what? A child, a stranger, something with clawed hands and a twisted smile. But there was nothing, just my clothes hanging still and silent. I let out a shaky breath, exhaling a laugh that was closer to a sob. And then something whispered my name, not from inside the closet, from right behind me. I whirled around, my phone's flashlight flaring, but the room was empty. I didn't sleep after that. The following day, I skipped work. Instead, I went digging. I started with Roland, no social media, no recent records. The building's tenant list showed his name, but nothing before that. It was as if he had materialized out of nowhere. I went deeper, checking old archives, news reports. That's when I found it, 30 years ago. A man named Roland lived in the same apartment. He had a wife, a baby. Neighbors heard screaming one night. A fight. Then silence. When police arrived, they found the apartment empty. The wife and child were gone. No signs of struggle, no bodies, just a deep series of claw marks on the inside of a locked closet. Roland swore he didn't do it. He said something took them, that they were still in the walls, whispering to him. They put him away after that. The apartment sat vacant for years until someone else moved in. Another man, another disappearance. The records repeated the same pattern over the years. And now Roland was back, or maybe he had never really left. I slammed my laptop shut, my breath coming in shallow bursts. My apartment felt smaller, colder. The walls pressed in. I needed to leave. I grabbed my keys, my bag, my phone. I rushed to the door and yanked it open and froze. Roland was standing there, but something was wrong. His clothes were the same as mine. His posture mirrored mine exactly. His face, it was my face. He smiled. And from the darkened hallway behind him, the sound of a baby giggling filled the air. I didn't scream. I couldn't, because in that moment I knew I was never going to leave. I had just come home from class, exhausted. The weight of my backpack pulled against my shoulder as I fumbled for my keys. That's when I saw it, a small, crumpled piece of paper wedged under my door. At first, I thought it was junk mail. But the moment I picked it up, I saw the rushed, shaky handwriting. Please switch apartments with me for one night. Just one night. I'll explain later. Rachel, you, my next-door neighbor, I laughed. A joke, maybe, a prank. I had spoken to Rachel a handful of times, just casual hellos in the hallway. Why would she ask me this? I shook my head, tossed the note on my kitchen counter, and went about my night. Sleep came quickly, but it clung loosely, fragile as mist. I stirred at the first sound, unsure if it was part of my dream or something far worse. Then it came again. Knock, 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 slow, unhurried, as if whoever or whatever it was had all the time in the world. The sound dragged me from sleep, my body still sluggish, but my mind sharpening with unease. My first thought was the front door. My apartment wasn't in the best neighborhood, and odd noises were common. But then knock, knock, knock. Not the door, from the window. A spike of cold fear lanced through me. I lived on the 3rd floor. The air in my room changed, thickening into something almost tangible. The kind of wrongness that clings to the dark places in childhood nightmares. The curtains stirred, slow and lazy, but the window was shut. The wind outside whispered, but it didn't press against the glass. It couldn't. Then scrape. A long, deliberate drag, like nails raking against the surface. Every muscle in my body tensed, my breath locking in my throat. My mind scrambled for an explanation. A bird, a tree branch, but I knew better. There was no balcony, no ledge, no way for anything or anyone to be out there. I forced my hand toward my phone, my fingers shaking as I typed. Something, at my window. Tell me I'm crazy. The message sent, no response, a beat. Then knock, knock, knock. Closer now, heavier. My skin prickled with the sensation of being watched. I sat up, breath shallow, the blankets tangled around my legs. The room was too quiet, the silence pressing in like a held breath. I had to look. I moved with slow, mechanical motions, each movement feeling unnatural, like I was a puppet being pulled toward the curtain. My hand reached out. The fabric was cold. I yanked it back. And nothing. The street below stretched empty, the buildings casting long, skeletal shadows under the dim glow of the streetlights. No one stood outside my window. There was no place for them to stand, but the glass smudged prints. 5 long fingers streaked downward as if someone or something had dragged its hand across the pane from the outside. My stomach twisted. A fresh wave of ice ran through my veins. I staggered back, my pulse a frantic drumbeat in my ears. No, this wasn't happening. I locked my windows. I knew I locked them. I spun, gripping my phone like a lifeline, and typed again. Rachel, answer me, please. 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Then a new sound, not from the window, from inside the apartment. Behind me, a slow, dragging breath. The air grew colder, thick with something unseen, something waiting. My skin prickled as if invisible fingers were grazing my spine. I couldn't move. I couldn't turn around. The breath deepened, the sound curling around my ear like a whisper let me in. My body snapped into motion. I ran. The next moments blurred together, fingers fumbling with locks, bare feet pounding down the hallway, slamming into Rachel's door. I pounded against it frantic, my breath coming in wild, desperate gasps. When she finally opened, I shoved past her, locking the door behind me. I must have looked deranged. I told her everything. The knocking, the scratching, the breath at my neck. And when I finished, she just stared at me. Then she said, "Jess, your window doesn't face the street." I froze. "It faces the alley." My stomach dropped. I knew that alley. It was too narrow for anyone to stand outside my window. No ledge, no fire escape. No way to knock. We didn't sleep that night. By morning, I forced myself to return to my apartment. Sunlight pooled through the bedroom window, golden and warm. The same window I knew I had locked. It was open. The smudged fingerprints were gone. But the glass was still cold. As if something had just been there, still waiting. I should have left. Packed a bag, found a motel, slept somewhere, anywhere else. But I didn't. Curiosity, stupidity, maybe both. Instead, I sat in bed, my back pressed against the headboard, blanket pulled tight to my chest. The room felt too quiet, too still. The heater hummed faintly, its warmth doing nothing to chase away the icy knot forming in my stomach. From the bathroom, the faucet dripped, drip, 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 each drop stretching the silence thinner and thinner. I stared at the window, waiting. For what exactly? I wasn't sure. Then knock, 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 my stomach clenched. I froze. Knock, 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 slow. Rhythmic, deliberate, not from the door, from the window. I swallowed hard, my throat dry as sandpaper. I live on the 3rd floor. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone, the screen's glow painting my hands ghostly pale. I switched on the flashlight. The beam wavered, shaking along with me as I raised it toward the glass. My pulse pounded in my ears, deafening. The light hit the window, and I saw it. A shape. A silhouette pressed against the glass, distorted and wrong. Too tall, too thin. Its limbs stretched unnaturally, its fingers, long, jointed like a spider's legs, traced slow, deliberate patterns on the pane. No face. Just the outline of a head, slightly tilted like it was watching me. A cold wave of terror slammed into me. My lungs seized, the air in the room thick and suffocating. My breath hitched as I scrambled backward, my spine colliding with the headboard. Knock, 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 the tapping continued. Steady, unbothered. Then a sound, a whisper, not human, high-pitched, unnatural, slipping through the glass like it was inside the room with me. I choked on a gasp, my body locking in place. My brain screamed at me to run, to move, to do something, but I couldn't. I could only sit there, paralyzed, as the whispering slithered through the air. And then it vanished. Gone, no movement, no retreating footsteps, no rustle of fabric, just gone, but the whispering. That didn't stop. It was coming from behind me. I didn't sleep. I spent the entire night sitting up in bed, watching the window, waiting for something, anything to happen again. But it never did, not until dawn. The first rays of sunlight bled through the blinds, casting pale streaks across the floor, the illusion of safety. But I knew better now. I was done. I shoved clothes into my backpack with trembling hands. I didn't care about school, my lease, or anything else. None of it mattered anymore. I just needed to leave. The apartment felt heavier, like the walls were pressing in. Every shadow stretched a little too far. Every creak in the floor made my skin crawl. My gut screamed at me to hurry. I grabbed my keys, slinging the backpack over my shoulder when my phone buzzed. A message. Rachel, did it knock? A chill slithered down my spine. My fingers hovered over the screen before I finally typed back, yes. 3 dots appeared. She was typing. My breath caught in my throat. Then the reply came. It chose you now. My stomach twisted. The room suddenly felt colder. That's when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. I went rigid. It was faint, distant, coming from the other side of the apartment. My heart pounded in my ears as the knocking came again. Knock, 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 closer. I turned slowly, my pulse hammering in my skull. My bedroom door was open, just a sliver. The hallway beyond it dark, too dark. The air felt thick, heavy. It was hard to breathe. Then I realized the knocking wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from inside the apartment. Closer. Knock, knock, knock. I wasn't alone. I grew up hearing about the unfinished bridge on the outskirts of town. It was supposed to connect 2 highways, but construction suddenly stopped. No one really knows why. Some say funding ran out, others whisper about accidents. But the strangest part? At night, people swear they see headlights moving across it. The road ends in midair, but the cars never fall. They never arrive. My friends always dismissed it as an urban legend, but I had to know the truth. Brittany had uncovered what really is it. Brittany and her friends drove in near silence, the rumble of the tires swallowed by the thick, pressing darkness of the rural road. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic, almost like rusted iron. It was around 11 p.m. when they reached the bridge, its skeletal frame barely visible beneath the pale, flickering moonlight. The pavement was fractured, jagged cracks forming eerie patterns, as if the ground itself had tried to swallow the road whole. Weeds curled hungrily through the fissures, their roots tangled like grasping fingers. A rusted road-closed sign lay slumped against a broken barricade, its faded letters barely legible under the grime of time. Lisa laughed, though the sound was thin, forced. "This is it, just a dead-end road." Her voice echoed in the night, too loud, too sharp, like it didn't belong here. Mary Kay frowned, arms wrapped tightly around herself as if warding off the cold or something else. "Then why do people keep seeing headlights?" she murmured, her breath visible in the sudden chill that settled around them. Evangeline shifted, her stance rigid. "Maybe they're just reflections from the highway," she said, but her voice wavered, betraying the unease that coiled in her chest. The wind picked up, a slow, crawling gust that sent a shiver down my spine. It whispered through the trees, a hushed, spectral murmur, like unseen figures sharing a secret just beyond the edge of hearing. My fingers trembled as I stepped forward, my pulse hammering against my ribs. The night felt heavy, suffocating. The bridge stretched ahead, a gaping maw of shadows leading into the unknown. I swallowed hard. "Then let's wait and see." And so we did. And the silence pressed in like a held breath, waiting to exhale. Midnight arrived like a held breath, the kind that sits heavy in your chest, waiting to be released. The air had thickened, dense with the scent of damp asphalt and the earthy musk of overgrown weeds. And then headlights. Faint at first, just a distant glow in the swirling mist, but undeniable. The beams cut through the fog, bright and unnatural, painting long, jagged shadows across the broken pavement. A sickly yellow light, too old, too dim, like the car dragging it forward had rolled straight out of another time. "Holy crap, it's real," Lisa whispered, her voice barely more than a breath, but in the hush of the night it sounded deafening. We stood frozen, watching, waiting, our pulses hammering in sync with the approaching hum of an unseen engine. It should have stopped. It should have hesitated. But it didn't. The car, if that's what it was, kept moving, steady and deliberate, heading straight for the drop-off where the bridge had collapsed decades ago. I clenched my fists, my breath caught in my throat. Any second now, metal would crumple, glass would shatter, tires would skid in a desperate, futile attempt to find ground that no longer existed. But none of that happened. No impact, no sound, no crash. Instead, the headlights simply vanished, swallowed whole by the void ahead, as if they had crossed onto a road that wasn't there. The mist curled in their absence, erasing any trace of what we had just seen. And then the silence returned, deeper than before, pressing in like an unseen hand tightening its grip. Something inside me burned with restless curiosity, a gnawing need that overpowered every warning scream in my head. I had to know. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I'm walking onto the bridge." Evangeline's hand shot out, fingers digging into my wrist, cold and desperate. "Are you insane?" Her breath was shaky, barely louder than the night breeze. "What if you fall? Then explain how those cars don't." I snapped, my pulse a wild drumbeat against my ribs. The others exchanged uneasy glances, their reluctance thick in the air. But hesitation gave way to something else, something just as reckless, just as desperate to understand. One by one, they followed, stepping onto the fractured pavement with the caution of trespassers in sacred, forbidden ground. The air changed the second my foot crossed the threshold. It wasn't just cold. It was heavy, pressing down like unseen hands against my shoulders, as if the night itself resisted our presence. The world around us felt muted, suffocated, like we had stepped into something not meant to be touched. We crept forward, breath shallow, our steps slow and deliberate. The bridge groaned beneath us, a soundless protest that vibrated through my bones. The edge loomed just ahead, a gaping void where the road should have continued. My stomach coiled tight, but I forced myself to look down. And then we heard it, tires rolling over asphalt. A slow, steady sound, unmistakable, but the bridge was empty. We were the only ones standing there. The rumble of an unseen engine vibrated through the cracked pavement, deep and resonant, like a growl rolling up from the depths of something ancient. My breath hitched, my pulse a frantic staccato against my ribs. The air thickened, pressing against my skin, and for the first time since stepping onto this cursed bridge, I felt it. Something was here with us. Lisa's sharp gasp cut through the night. "Look!" My head snapped up just as the first flicker of light pierced the mist. At first, it was just a glow, distant and floating like a will-o'-the-wisp luring us deeper into the unknown. But then the beams sharpened, slicing through the darkness in two perfect, blinding circles. Headlights, but not from the town, not from anywhere that made sense. They glowed from the opposite end of the bridge, the side that led to nothing. The edge where the pavement should have crumbled into the abyss. But the lights didn't falter. They didn't pause. They were coming toward us. Fast. The engine roared, the headlights growing larger, brighter, swallowing the space between us with impossible speed. The bridge trembled beneath my feet. My breath caught. And in that moment, I realized whatever was driving toward us wasn't stopping. We ran, not thinking, not looking back, just running. My pulse roared in my ears, louder than the phantom engine chasing us. I don't remember screaming, but my throat burned, raw and aching as if I had been. The air crackled, thick with something unseen, something unnatural, like the electric charge before a storm unleashes hell. The headlights blazed impossibly bright, searing through the mist, cutting long, distorted shadows that stretched and warped as if reaching for us. The bridge shuddered beneath my feet. I tripped, hitting the ground hard, the impact rattling through my bones. A gasp tore from my lips as I scrambled back, the others crashing down beside me, panting, wide-eyed. The cold earth felt solid, real, but nothing else did. We watched, helpless, as the lights bore down on the edge of the bridge. Any second now, impact, twisting metal, a plunge into nothingness, but it never came. The headlights simply vanished. No crash, no sound. 1 second they were there, blinding, undeniable. The next they were gone, swallowed whole by the void as if they had never existed. The silence that followed was unnatural, suffocating. A silence that listened. Evangeline's voice wavered. "What the hell did we just see?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't move. Because in that deafening quiet, realization curled around my spine like ice. The bridge wasn't abandoned. It was still being used by something. I couldn't let it go. Sleep never came easy after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those headlights burning through the mist, chasing us down, only to vanish into nothing. So I started digging. The official records were useless, just dead ends and vague mentions of structural concerns. But the old newspaper archives, they told a different story, a darker one. The bridge hadn't always been a bridge. It had been built over an older road. A forgotten path that once carved through the valley, winding toward town. Decades ago, on a night just like the one we stood on that crumbling pavement, a family was driving home. They never made it. The reports were chillingly brief. Brakes failed. The car skidded in the rain, veered off the road, and plunged into the ravine below. No survivors, but the whispers that came after, they were worse. People swore they still saw headlights on foggy nights. A car that never slowed, never swerved, just barreled straight ahead as if it were still following a road that no longer existed. The locals had a saying, they never made it home. But maybe they never stopped driving. I noticed it in the early morning light. The words were faint at first, smudged along the edges, but unmistakable. "Help me." Scrawled in shaky handwriting, it stretched across the condensation on my neighbor's window. At first, I thought it was a prank, maybe some kind of joke, but something about the uneven, frantic strokes unsettled me. I lived in an older apartment complex, the kind where tenants didn't really talk to each other, but I had exchanged enough small talk with Sarah, the woman who lived in that unit, to know she wasn't the type to do something like this for fun. I knocked on her door. After a few moments, it opened a crack. Sarah's tired eyes met mine, her face pale and drawn. "Hey," I said carefully. I saw something on your window. Are you okay? Her brow furrowed. What do you mean? I hesitated. The message on your window, it said, help me. She blinked at me, her expression utterly blank. I didn't write that. I frowned. It's there right now, I just saw it. Sarah's lips parted slightly, her throat bobbing as she swallowed. Then, after a long pause, she shook her head. No one's been in my apartment all night. Something about the way she said it sent a ripple of unease through my stomach. I glanced past her into the dimly lit space behind her. Everything seemed normal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Okay, I said slowly. Just let me know if you need anything, all right? She nodded, then closed the door. I stood there for a moment, unsure what to do next. Maybe she really didn't know about the message. Maybe it had been written from the outside, but her apartment was on the 3rd floor. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept glancing at her window from mine, but the words had faded. The glass was clean. I told myself I had imagined it. Maybe the morning light had played tricks on me. Then the next morning, a new message appeared. Do not trust them. This time, the letters were darker, pressed harder into the condensation, as if written with more urgency. I felt my pulse quicken. My first instinct was to go over there again, but a deep, gnawing anxiety held me back. What if Sarah denied it again? What if my thoughts cut off as my phone buzzed? A text. Sarah, don't come over. My skin crawled. I typed back, what's going on? Who wrote that? The typing indicator appeared, then stopped. Then another text, please just ignore it. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I sat frozen, staring at her window, watching the letters slowly fade as the morning air warmed the glass. By nightfall, I felt suffocated in my own apartment. Every creak of the building, every distant sound in the hallway made me jump. I barely slept, my ears straining for anything that might explain what was happening. And then at exactly 3:12 a.m., I woke up to the sound of scratching. Not at my door, at my window, my 3rd floor window. I bolted upright, my heart hammering against my ribs. The room was dark, but the sound was unmistakable. A slow, deliberate scrape like nails dragging across the glass. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence stretched, pressing against my ears. Then a whisper, faint, distant. Help me! I didn't sleep after that. By morning, Sarah's window was empty. No messages, no condensation, just clear, smooth glass reflecting the sky like nothing had ever happened. I decided to knock again. My hands trembled as I rapped against the door. It swung open almost immediately. Sarah stood there, looking worse than before, dark circles under her eyes, her hands trembling slightly. Before I could speak, she whispered, I'm leaving. What? I don't know what's happening, she said, voice barely above a breath, but I can't stay here anymore. Sarah, you should leave too. My stomach twisted. Is it someone messing with you? Her expression darkened. It's not someone. The way she said it made my skin prickle. Then what is it? She opened her mouth, closed it, then shook her head. Just leave before it notices you. She shut the door before I could say anything else. 2 days later, she was gone. The apartment was emptied overnight. No moving trucks, no sounds of packing, just gone. The new tenants moved in within a week. A couple in their mid-30s. Friendly enough. Then, one morning, as I was leaving for work, I glanced up at their window. The condensation was faint, but the words were clear. It knows you saw it. I live in a quiet neighborhood. The kind where the biggest scandal is who forgot to bring their trash bins in, where the sidewalks are lined with perfectly pruned hedges, and where the smell of fresh-cut grass lingers in the air. The sun beams down on white picket fences, the laughter of children echoes from driveways, and the world feels safe, predictable. The kind of place where nothing bad ever happens. The kind where you know everyone by name, or at least you think you do. But there's always been an exception. The old Victorian house at the end of the street. It doesn't belong here, not with its warped porch steps and sagging roof, its once white paint now a sickly shade of gray. The "For Rent" sign out front is sun-bleached and cracked, leaning at an awkward angle as if even the wood has given up. And yet, no matter how long it stands there, someone always seems to be inside. I know because I've seen them. My neighbor, tall, gaunt, wrapped in clothes that seem just a little too heavy for the season. But the strangest thing, the gloves, thick, black, covering their hands entirely, stretching just past the wrists, fitting like a second skin. It's 95 degrees today. The air is thick with humidity, the kind that makes your skin stick to itself, that makes the pavement shimmer like a mirage. I watch from my driveway as my neighbor waters their plants, the droplets hissing as they hit the sun-baked ground. Even in this unbearable heat, they never take the gloves off. Something about that bothers me. I try to reason with myself. Maybe it's a skin condition, maybe burns, maybe they're just particular. I tell myself not to stare, not to let curiosity get the better of me. But then they look up. Their head turns toward me slowly, too slowly, like a rusted hinge creaking into place. Their gaze lingers, unblinking, something unreadable in their eyes. My stomach twists, a deep, primal discomfort settling into my bones. I drop my gaze, shivering despite the heat. That night, in the quiet of my room, my phone buzzes, a message from Lisa. Heard about the new neighbor. Some guy before them wore gloves too. Weird, right? My fingers hover over the keyboard before I type. What do you mean, before them? I'd just saying every tenant there wears gloves. I stare at the screen, a strange unease curling around my ribs. I don't know why that sentence sends a chill down my spine, but it does. Curiosity gets the better of me. I shuffle toward the window, peeking through the blinds. Under the porch light, my neighbor stands completely still. Their hands flex slow, mechanical movements like someone testing the limits of unfamiliar limbs. My breath catches, it's just gloves, but something about the way they move feels off. Stiff, unnatural, as if they aren't used to them. That's when I hear it, a soft, scraping noise. My pulse stutters. I hold my breath. It's faint but persistent, like nails dragging against wood. The sound slithers into my ears, creeping along my spine, setting my nerves alight. It's coming from right outside my window. I don't move. I don't breathe. The darkness outside feels heavier now, pressing against the glass like something lurking just beyond the veil of night. I squeeze my eyes shut, telling myself it's nothing, that it's just the wind, that I'm overthinking. But the next day, as I pass the old Victorian house, my neighbor is sitting on the porch, watching me. I hesitate, swallowing down the unease clawing at my throat. "Hey," I force out, attempting a casual smile. "Hot day, huh?" They don't react, just sit there motionless. I shift my weight, glancing at their hands. "So, you always wear gloves?" For a moment, they just stare. Then slowly, their mouth twitches into something that almost resembles amusement. "I don't remember wearing gloves." My stomach drops. A cold, sharp dread seeps into my bones. My skin prickles. I know what I've seen. They always wear them, every single day. I can't sleep that night. My thoughts race, looping over and over. They don't remember. That's impossible. That's not right. And then a faint ripping sound. My breath catches. My fingers clutch the blankets tight. The sound is coming from outside. Heart hammering, I inch toward the window, peering through the slats of the blinds. My neighbor stands in their backyard. Their back is turned to me. One gloved hand pulls at the fabric, tugging, stretching. I watch, unable to look away as the glove tears. And beneath it, not flesh, stitches, uneven, jagged, raw, stretching too tightly over something wrong. My breath leaves me in a shuddering gasp. And then their head snaps up. Their eyes lock onto mine. I stumble backward, my pulse pounding in my ears, the air thick with the suffocating weight of realization. I was never supposed to see that, and now they know I have. I should have ignored it. Just another urban legend buried in the depths of a cryptic forum. But something about the post clawed at my curiosity, whispering to me like a voice just behind my ear. Have you ever seen the library that only appears at midnight? The thread was filled with stories, accounts from people swearing it was real. A library that doesn't exist during the day, no records, no history. But when the clock strikes 12, the doors unlock. And inside. The books on the shelves have one thing in common: your name on the cover. One comment stood out, bolded, almost like a warning. If you find it, don't open the book with your name. That should have been my first clue to walk away. But I didn't. I texted my friends, Jinwoo, Juwon, Melissa, Veronica. Midnight challenge, you in? A few jokes, some dares thrown back and forth, and we were set. By 11:50 p.m., we stood at the edge of town, where the city lights faded into a stretch of abandoned streets. And there it was, a building that hadn't been there before. It loomed against the night sky, Gothic style, like something ripped out of a nightmare. Its towering spires clawed at the stars, and the massive wooden doors looked as if they hadn't been touched in centuries. A low fog curled around the stone steps. The air smelled thick, damp, like old paper and something else, something rotting. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. Guys, are we really doing this? Juwon snorted. Too late to back out now. Then the doors creaked open. No one had touched them. I swallowed hard as we stepped inside. The moment we crossed the threshold, the air grew still. Too still. Behind us, the doors groaned before slamming shut with a deafening boom. Veronica cursed, rushing back to the entrance, but the doors wouldn't budge. That's when I saw them. The books. Row after row of towering shelves stretched into an impossible darkness, and every book had our names on the cover. My stomach tightened. I reached out, fingers brushing against the spine of one labeled Harry. A thin layer of dust clung to it like it had been waiting for me. Jinwoo spoke up, his voice tight. Don't open it. I hesitated. Why not? I don't know, I just have a bad feeling. Then the whispers started. They drifted through the shelves, soft at first, like wind rustling through pages. But as they grew louder, the sound twisted, warping into something unnatural. I did the worst thing I could have done. I opened my book. A sharp gust of wind tore through the library, and the pages began flipping on their own. My heart pounded as I skimmed the words. My life. Every moment I'd ever lived, recorded in ink. But as I reached the last page, my breath hitched. It was blank, except for one sentence. You should not have come here, Harry. A choked noise escaped my throat. Guys in my book just wrote something by itself. The whispers swelled, twisting into screams. The shelves groaned, shifting, closing in like walls pressing tighter and tighter. And then I saw them, dark figures standing between the shelves, no eyes, no faces, but I could feel them watching us. A voice, barely a whisper, sent shivers down my spine. SHHH, they can hear you. I spun around. A girl stood there, pale, hollow-eyed. She looked like she hadn't seen the sun in years. Jinwoo's voice trembled. Who are you? Her gaze flickered to the shadows behind us. I've been here too long. Don't make a sound. Juwon took a step forward. How do we get out? The girl's expression turned hollow. You don't. The lights flickered. One by one, they snapped off. My breath hitched. Darkness swallowed the room, and in that endless black, something shifted. A sound, slow, deliberate, something dragging itself closer. Then silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. The last thing I remember was a scream, distorted like it had been pulled from my own throat. And then, I woke up, drenched in sweat, tangled in my sheets. Sunlight streamed through my window. My heart pounded in my ears. Just a dream, right? I let out a shaky breath, rubbing my temples. It had to be a dream. Then I saw it. Sitting on my desk, a book, the cover, my name. I don't know when it started. A few weeks ago, maybe longer. It slipped into my life so quietly I barely noticed at first. But now I can't ignore it. Because every single night at exactly 2:37 a.m., my neighbor's dog starts barking. It's not a regular bark. It's frantic, desperate, like something unseen is creeping closer. At first, I told myself it was just a coincidence. Dogs bark. Maybe it saw a stray cat. Maybe it was dreaming. But then the barking stops. Instantly, the moment my eyes open, the silence that follows is worse than the barking. It's thick, unnatural, pressing in on me like something waiting just outside the edges of my vision. I hold my breath, straining to hear anything else. Footsteps, whispers, the rustling of movement. But there's nothing. Just my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. I don't check the time. I don't have to. I already know what it'll say. 2:37 a.m. I roll onto my side, staring at the wall that separates my room from my neighbor. The dog is still awake. I can hear it packing, whining, claws clicking against the floor. It knows something. It senses something I can't see. The first few nights, I convinced myself I was imagining things. But last night, I made a mistake. I got up. I stepped to the window, peeling back the curtain just an inch. The street outside was empty, washed in pale moonlight. But the dog, oh God, the dog wasn't looking at the street. It wasn't even looking at my window. It was staring at my door. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen. Maybe seconds, maybe minutes. But then, as if it sensed me watching, the dog slowly turned its head, and it stopped barking. That was the first time I saw it. The shadow. It was standing at my front door. I slammed the curtain shut, my breath coming too fast, too sharp. I backed away, my skin crawling, a horrible pressure settling in my chest. My phone was on my nightstand. I grabbed it, fumbling to turn on the screen. 2:38 a.m. And then a knock. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The knock came again, slow, deliberate. The dog started whimpering. I wanted to convince myself it was just a dream. But when I woke up this morning, there was something on my doorstep. A single, deep scratch, not on the wood, on the inside. I had to know. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I was letting paranoia twist something ordinary into something sinister. So tonight, I stayed awake. No tossing and turning in bed, no groggy confusion. I sat curled up on the couch, eyes locked on the clock. The room felt too quiet. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed distant, swallowed by something heavier, something waiting. The lamp beside me flickered, its glow trembling as if it, too, sensed what was coming. The barking exploded through the wall. I flinched, my pulse spiking. There was no delay, no hesitation. The moment the numbers changed, the dog erupted in a frenzy, clawing, yelping, a desperate, frantic sound like it was trying to dig its way through the wall, trying to reach me. Like clockwork, I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I leaned forward, straining to hear past the barking. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound came from the other side of the wall, sharp and frantic, claws against wood. Dog wasn't just barking. It was trying to warn me, my hands curled into fists. "What are you barking at?" I whispered, more to myself than anything. Silence. The barking stopped. The scratching stopped. The sudden quiet sent a cold spike down my spine. My own breathing sounded too loud, too harsh in the stillness. I held my breath, ears straining. Then a slow, deliberate creak, not from outside, from inside my apartment. My body locked up. Every muscle tensed, frozen in place. I wasn't alone. The air felt different, charged, heavy, pressing in from all sides. I forced myself to turn my head, scanning the darkened hallway leading to my bedroom. The shadows seemed deeper, stretching too far, too thick. Another creak. Closer. The lamp flickered again, casting jittery shadows along the walls. I wasn't imagining this. Something was here, and it was getting closer. I knew I shouldn't check. Every instinct screamed at me to stay put, to pretend I hadn't heard anything. But I had to know. With my phone gripped tight in one hand, I crept down the hallway, my bare feet barely making a sound against the floor. The beam of my flashlight trembled with my breathing, casting shaky light on the walls. The air felt heavier here, colder. The kind of cold that settles deep in your bones. This was stupid. Just a dog freaking out, right? That's what I told myself over and over, but my pulse didn't slow. I reached the front door and pressed my eye to the peephole. Empty. The hallway outside stretched on in eerie silence, dimly lit by the flickering overhead bulb. No movement, no shadows, just the quiet, dead space beyond my door. I let out a slow breath, my shoulders sagging. Nothing. Then a violent slam against the door. The sound exploded through the apartment like a gunshot, rattling the walls, shaking the floor beneath me. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. My breath hitched, stuck somewhere between a gasp and a scream. Silence. The dog had stopped barking. The apartment felt different now, like something had shifted. Like the air itself had changed. I stared at the door, my mind racing, pulse hammering. That wasn't the wind. That wasn't my imagination. Something was on the other side, and it knew I was here. I could feel their eyes on me before I even looked up. The cafe was warm, the scent of coffee and baked bread filling the air, but I couldn't shake the chill that had settled deep in my bones. My fingers stirred my coffee absent-mindedly, watching the steam curl into the air like ghostly fingers. "You look like you haven't slept in weeks." Lisa's voice cut through the low murmur of the cafe, and I barely had the energy to glare at her. "Thanks, Lisa. Real helpful." My voice came out flat, exhausted. "No, seriously." Mary Kay leaned in, concern flickering behind her eyes. "What's up?" I hesitated. Saying it out loud made it feel more real, more ridiculous. But I was too tired to lie, too wired from the last few nights to brush it off. "It's my neighbor's dog," I finally said, voice lower now. "It barks at the exact same time every night, 2:37 a.m., and it only stops when I wake up." A pause, a shift in the air. The group exchanged glances, the kind that said, "That's not normal." "That sounds bad." Rachel set her cup down carefully, her expression unreadable. Evangeline tilted her head, thoughtful. "Maybe it's barking at something it sees." I forced out a short laugh, though it felt hollow. "Like what? There's nothing there." Silence stretched between us, thick and uneasy. I could feel it pressing against my skin, the weight of something unspoken settling over the table. Then, softly, almost hesitant, "Or maybe." Mary Kay's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Maybe there is." I told myself I wouldn't look. No more guessing, no more paranoia. Whatever was happening, whatever the dog saw, whatever had been scratching at my walls, it didn't matter. If I didn't open my eyes, it wouldn't be real. Rain drummed against the window, heavy and steady, masking the distant sounds of the city outside. My room was dark, the kind of suffocating blackness that made everything feel closer. I lay still, arms pinned to my sides, every muscle tense. The clock on my nightstand glowed faintly. 2:36 a.m. Almost time. I held my breath. 2:37 a.m. The barking started, but this time it was worse, louder, desperate. The frantic yelps echoed through my apartment, claws raking against something solid, but not the wall, the door. The scratching was at my bedroom door. I clenched my fists under the covers, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. It was fine. It was just the dog, just a coincidence. Then the doorknob rattled. I bit down on my lip, forcing myself not to make a sound. The metal handle creaked as it slowly turned, the click of the latch reverberating through the silent room. No, I won't open my eyes. The barking cut off, just like that. 1 second it was there, filling the room, warning me. The next, silence. A different kind of silence. Too empty, too wrong, something was in here with me. A slow exhale brushed against my cheek, warm and deliberate, right there, inches from my face. I should have opened my eyes. The first time I noticed it, the sky was bruised with streaks of dying sunlight, a bleeding orange fading into violet. The air was thick with the scent of rain on concrete, a dull humidity pressing against my skin as I trudged home. My tote bag heavy with the weight of another long shift at the bookstore. My apartment complex stood like a tired monolith against the evening sky. 4 stories of peeling paint, rusted fire escapes, and a single flickering hallway light that buzzed like an angry insect. I never liked that light. It always made the shadows seem deeper, like they had edges, like they were waiting. I climbed the stairs, keys clutched in my fist when the sensation hit me. That prickling awareness, the slow crawl of something unseen pressing its gaze against my back. It wasn't the kind of feeling you shake off. It was heavy, deliberate. I stopped at my door, my breath slow, measured. And then, before I even knew why, I looked up. The window across from mine, third floor. A shadow moved behind the curtain, a sliver of pale fabric parting just enough to reveal something. A glimpse of a figure. Watching. I squinted, pulse rising, trying to make out a face, but the light shifted and the curtain dropped. The window was still again, silent, blank. I swallowed, forcing my lungs to take in air. Maybe it was the wind, maybe it was nothing. Except that apartment had been empty for years. I knew that. Still, I turned my key in the lock and pushed into my apartment, convincing myself it was just a trick of the light. The next morning, steam curled from my coffee cup as I stepped out onto the balcony. The world was slow, still waking. Muffled car engines, distant sirens, the city stretching its limbs. And then I saw it, the window, open, just a crack. A chill coiled around my spine. I had never seen that window open before. And yet, there it was, parted just enough for someone to watch me. I felt it again. That creeping, insidious sensation of being observed, as if unseen eyes were cataloging every breath I took. My skin tightened, my mouth ran dry. I forced myself to look away. That evening, I knocked on my neighbor Roland's door. His place always smelled like paint thinner and old wood. He answered in a wrinkled t-shirt, a smudge of charcoal on his fingers, his expression shifting the moment I asked. 3B, he repeated, his brow furrowing. I nodded. Yeah, do you know who lives there? He didn't answer right away, his lips pressed into a thin line. No one's lived there for years, he said finally. The last guy, he had some problems. I swallowed. What kind of problems? Roland exhaled slowly, rubbing his jaw. He was convinced something was watching him, from inside his own apartment. A pulse of dread slammed through me. Said he'd wake up and find his furniture moved. Hear whispers when he was alone. Started seeing things in the mirror, things that weren't him. My stomach clenched. And then Roland's eyes flickered toward the floor. One night he jumped. His voice was quiet. Right from that window, the words settled like ice in my veins. And no one's lived there since, I asked, but my voice was smaller now. Nope. He hesitated, then added, management won't even rent it out. Some legal thing, or maybe just bad luck. I forced out a laugh, brittle and hollow. Right, bad luck. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at my ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. 2 a.m. I woke up to the sound of tapping, soft, rhythmic, tap, tap, tap. It came from the window. A pulse of cold terror shot through me. Slowly, stiffly, I turned my head, dreading what I would see across the narrow gap between buildings. The window of 3B stood wide open. A shadow stood inside, not moving, not shifting, just watching. The dim glow of the street lamp barely touched them, but I could feel their eyes. My breath hitched, heart hammering so hard it drowned out everything else. My fingers fumbled for my phone. I dialed Roland's number with shaking hands. He picked up on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. Hello. Roland, I whispered, my voice barely audible. There's someone in 3B, they're staring at me. Silence, then his voice tight, urgent. Sarah, close your curtains right now. I didn't hesitate. My hands trembled as I grabbed the fabric and yanked it shut, plunging my apartment into darkness. My breath came in shallow gasps. What the hell is going on? I whispered. Roland's voice was quieter now. Just don't look into that window again. Trust me. Morning came with pale, watery light that did nothing to warm my bones. My exhaustion hung heavy, my limbs weak with unease. But I couldn't help it. As I stepped out of the building, I glanced up. The curtains of 3B were parted. And through the narrow gap, a single bloodshot eye stared down at me. It knew I had seen it. And now it wasn't going to stop watching. I grip the steering wheel tighter as I spot the old motel up ahead. The neon vacancy sign buzzes, flickering every few seconds. The place looks abandoned, peeling paint, an overgrown parking lot. But for weeks, I've been calling this place trying to book a room. And every time, the receptionist says the same thing. We're fully booked, but there are no cars, no people. So who booked the rooms? I should have known something was off the moment I stepped inside. The air was stale, thick with dust and something faintly sour, like rotting wood masked by cheap air freshener. The lobby was dimly lit, the kind of lighting that made everything feel frozen in time. Outdated floral wallpaper peeling at the edges, a sagging armchair in the corner, and a vending machine humming softly in the background. The front desk was empty. No clerk, no guests. Just a little brass bell sitting on the counter, tarnished with age. My fingers hovered over it before I pressed down lightly. Ding! The chime rang out, too loud in the silence. Too long. The sound stretched like it was bleeding through the walls, seeping into unseen corners of the motel. I shifted on my feet, suddenly uneasy. "Hello." My voice barely rose above a whisper. No answer. I checked my phone. No signal. Great. I was too tired for this. Hours of driving, eyes heavy with exhaustion. I just wanted a bed. I pressed the bell again, firmer this time. Ding, then ding. I hadn't touched it. My breath hitched. I took a step back. The bell wobbled slightly as if it had been nudged by an unseen hand. I swallowed hard, the weight of the silence pressing down on me. Maybe the clerk was nearby, playing a joke. Maybe an old AC vent had caused the vibration. Maybe. I leaned over the counter, peering through the half-open office door behind it. The room was dark, but I could make out a desk, some scattered papers, an old rotary phone. No movement, no sign of anyone. A chill slithered down my spine. I knocked lightly on the counter. Anyone here?" Silence. Then, from somewhere deep in the motel, past the hallway, beyond the flickering light, came the faintest sound. A soft, dragging noise, slow, uneven, like something was being pulled across the floor. I forced a breath into my lungs, trying to shake the creeping dread crawling up my arms. It was just an old motel. A run-down, empty motel. That's all. Then the bell rang again, ding, and behind me a voice whispered, "Check-in is closed." I should have trusted my gut the moment I pulled into the parking lot. The neon vacancy sign flickered weakly against the night, buzzing like an exhausted wasp. The building itself looked worn down, its paint cracked and peeling under the sickly glow of a single street lamp. It was the only place for miles, and I was too tired to keep driving. Inside, the air was thick, stale, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. The lobby was empty. No guests, no staff, just the little brass bell on the counter. When I pressed it, the chime rang out too long, stretching through the quiet like an echo that didn't know when to stop. It took too long for the clerk to appear. A thin man with sunken eyes, wearing a wrinkled polo. He slid a key across the counter without a word, barely looking at me. Room 209. Second floor. I climbed the stairs, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle in my bones. The hallway was dim, lit by a single buzzing fluorescent light. The carpet beneath my feet swallowed the sound of my footsteps, but something felt off. A strange heaviness in the air. I passed by the closed doors, each one hiding something unseen. Faint noises slipped through the gaps. Water running, a television murmuring in some distant room, a dry, rasping cough. Then I saw it. Room 209 door was slightly ajar. A thin sliver of darkness yawned between the frame. My room. But the key was still in my pocket. A prickle ran up the back of my neck. I hesitated, then pressed my ear to the wood, breathing, slow, shallow, just inches away. I held my breath. The silence stretched between us, whoever was on the other side and me. My pulse hammered against my ribs, but I forced my hand forward, fingers grazing the wood. I pushed it open. Nothing. The room was empty, but the bed. It was made. Crisp, tight sheets tucked into the corners. Only the pillows were wrong. The fabric was dented, the imprint of a head still fresh in the center. Someone had been here, or worse, they still were. There are places that feel wrong the moment you step into them. Places where the air is too thick, where the silence doesn't sit quite right. I should have known the moment I arrived at this motel. The hallway stretched out in front of me, dimly lit by a flickering overhead light. The carpet was old, worn thin in places, muffling my footsteps as I walked. Something about the air felt stale, unmoving, like it had been trapped here for too long. I just needed to get to my room, lock the door, and sleep. I turned to leave. That's when I saw him. A man stood at the far end of the hall, facing the wall, motionless, too still, like he was listening. My breath caught in my throat. The dim light cast long shadows, stretching unnaturally across the floor. Then, in a single, jerky movement, his head snapped toward me. My stomach dropped. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. His lips formed words I couldn't hear, over and over, faster each time. I ran. I didn't think, didn't look back. My feet barely touched the ground as I bolted down the stairs, nearly slipping as I reached the lobby. The clerk was gone. The place was empty. The old guest book sat open on the counter, coated in a fine layer of dust. I grabbed it, my hands shaking as I flipped through the pages. I needed to see who else had stayed here. Someone else had to be here, the names, every single one of them, written in my own handwriting. There are places you stay the night, and there are places you never should have stopped at all. This motel wasn't on my map. I don't even remember pulling into the lot. One moment I was driving through the empty highway, and the next I was standing at the check-in desk, scrawling my name into an old guest book. The clerk, if there even was one, was already gone by the time I looked up. The hallway was long, lined with doors that felt too close together. The air was thick, stale. Every step I took felt heavier, like I was sinking into something unseen. Then, behind me, a door creaked open. I froze. Another door groaned, the sound dragging against the silence like nails on wood. Then another, and another, soft shuffling, breaths just barely above a whisper. I turned my head, pulse hammering in my throat. The doors weren't just open, they were yawning into dark, empty spaces. But something was inside them. Moving, watching, I wasn't supposed to be here. My body reacted before my brain could. I ran. My feet barely touched the hallway carpet as I bolted down the stairs, through the lobby, out into the cold night air. I hit the car door so hard I nearly collapsed into the driver's seat. My fingers fumbled with the keys, slipping against the ignition as I struggled to breathe. Then I looked up. Every window of the motel, every single one was filled with shadowed figures, watching me. I didn't wait. My foot slammed against the gas, tires screeching against the pavement as I tore out of the lot and onto the highway. The road stretched out ahead, dark and empty, but my hands were shaking too hard to hold the wheel steady. That's when the radio crackled. The speakers buzzed with static, a broken, twisting sound that shouldn't have been there. Then, beneath the static, a voice, low, distorted, pushing through the noise. "Elizabeth, you forgot to check out." The factory that smokes, even though it's been shut down for decades, the air is heavy, dense with the weight of something unseen. It clings to my skin, thick with the sharp tang of rust and something fouler, something that reminds me of burnt hair and old blood. The road behind me is nothing but cracked asphalt swallowed by creeping weeds, a lifeline stretching back toward civilization. Ahead, the factory looms, its skeletal frame outlined against the starless sky. The rusted gates gape open just enough to let me slip through, the iron moaning softly as I push past. My pulse is a steady drumbeat in my ears, but I tell myself it's just the wind. The chimneys are dead, hollow things jutting into the night like broken teeth. And yet, from their blackened mouths, a thin wisp of smoke rises, curling and twisting as if it has a mind of its own. My breath catches. There's no wind, no movement in the air, and yet the smoke sways unnaturally, almost like it's aware of me. The thought makes my skin crawl. The factory is silent, but it isn't empty. The shadows stretch too long, pooling in places they shouldn't. The doors groan under their own weight as I push inside, the sound reverberating through the vast, empty space. The scent of something burnt lingers in the air, old and bitter. My boots scuff against the dust-coated floor, leaving tracks where none exist. No footprints, no signs of life. But the smoke is real. I can smell it now, acrid and fresh, like something smoldering just out of sight. Then a sound. A soft drip, drip, drip. I turn my head slowly, the hairs on the back of my neck standing at attention. My flashlight flickers as I lift it, the beam cutting through the thick dark. The dripping continues, rhythmic and steady. It echoes through the cavernous room, leading me deeper into the factory. And then I see it. A smear of something dark trailing across the floor, glistening wetly under the weak light. Not oil, not water, blood. It stretches forward, leading toward a half-collapsed doorway at the far end of the factory. My throat tightens. Every instinct screams at me to turn back, to run. But I force my feet forward, swallowing down the lump of dread rising in my chest. Beyond the doorway, something shifts, a shadow. A figure, and then a voice, low, rasping, as if dragged from a throat choked with smoke. "You shouldn't have come here." The scream slithers through the dark, thin and distant, yet too sharp to be imagined. It doesn't echo like it should in the vastness of the factory. It feels closer, pressing against my ears, threading into my thoughts. My breath hitches. A deep, primal instinct gnaws at my ribs, whispering that I should leave, that I need to leave. But my feet betray me, drawn forward against better judgment, against reason. The air is suffocating, thick with the bitter tang of burnt oil and something else, something sickly sweet, rotting beneath the surface. My flashlight beam wavers as I lift it, slicing through the dark like a trembling blade. Shadows shift, not from my movement, but from something deeper inside the factory. The machines loom in rusted stillness, their skeletal remains frozen in time, but they feel like they're waiting, like they're watching. That steel press in the corner, the one blackened and warped, seems to swallow the light. My gaze locks onto it, my pulse quickening. The metal isn't just twisted, it's ripped, peeled back like flesh, deep claw marks gouged into its surface. My stomach knots. Nothing human did this. Nothing should be able to. Another sound, not a scream this time, a shuffle, slow, deliberate, just beyond my flashlight's reach. The darkness thickens, presses closer, and for the first time I feel it. Not just the cold, not just the weight of the abandoned factory, but something else. Something unseen. Watching, waiting, I swallow hard. My grip tightens on the flashlight, my fingers slick with sweat. Then, from the blackness ahead, something moves. A figure, shrouded in shadow, its shape wrong, unnatural. The air warps around it, distorting, as if the very space it stands in refuses to hold it. And then it speaks, a voice like grinding metal, like burning flesh twisted into words. "You shouldn't be here." The door groans as it gives way, the rust flaking beneath my fingers. The air beyond is wrong, thicker, colder, pressing in like unseen hands. My breath comes shallow, my chest tightening with each step forward. My flashlight flickers again, spitting weak beams into the abyss. The room ahead yawns into darkness, its edges lost in shadow, the ceiling so low it feels like it's breathing with me. The walls drip with condensation, and the stench of wet earth and something metallic, something like blood, clings to the air. My pulse hammers as I take another step, the floorboards beneath me groaning as if whispering a warning. And then the door behind me slams shut. I spin, the flashlight jerking wildly. The stairwell is gone, no door, no exit, just a wall, damp and pulsing as if it's alive. My breath stutters. I know there was a way back, I know. But now all that remains is a suffocating silence, so thick it drowns the air itself. And then, from the darkness ahead, a scrape. Slow, deliberate, the sound of something moving, no, dragging itself toward me. I freeze. My flashlight trembles in my grip, the beam catching something, someone just at the edge of the light. A figure, hunched, unnatural. Limbs too long, fingers curled against the wet floor like a spider poised to lunge. Its head tilts, and then in the silence I hear it a breath. Not mine, close, too close. And then a whisper, rasping and broken, crawling up my spine like fingers on bone. You heard me scream, but I never left. The breath leaves my lungs in a sharp, silent gasp. The heat from the roaring furnaces licks at my skin, yet a chill coils deep in my bones. The machinery shrieks, grinding, relentless, metal on metal, a monstrous symphony of toil. And yet there is no one. No hands guiding the levers, no voices shouting over the din. Only him. The man stands motionless, his body ruined by fire and time. The flesh on his arms is charred, cracked like old leather stretched too tight, peeling away to reveal the raw sinew beneath. His shoulders rise and fall. He's breathing. The realization sends a jagged spike of terror through me. My flashlight trembles as I lift it higher. His head tilts at the movement, slow and unnatural, like his bones are learning how to bend again. The skin on his neck is blistered, the veins underneath pulsing with something dark, something wrong. And then he turns. His face is a ruin of melted flesh and jagged scars, but it's his eyes that lock me in place. Or rather, the absence of them. Where they should be, there is only hollow, blackened bone, sockets that seem impossibly deep, as if they don't end, as if they reach somewhere else. And yet, somehow, he sees me. The machines thunder on, gears slick with something thicker than oil, the air heavy with the scent of iron and burning flesh. My heartbeat slams against my ribs. I don't dare move. Then, his jaw creaks open. Not to speak, not to breathe, to scream. A wretched, shuddering wail, full of agony and something far worse, something hungry. The sound shreds through the factory, vibrating in the steel, rattling in my bones. The conveyor belt shudders to life behind him, and I realize it isn't carrying parts, it's carrying bodies. Twisted, broken figures, their limbs tangled in gears, their mouths stretched open in silent horror. The machines devour them, piece by piece, grinding them down as if they were nothing more than raw material. I stagger back, my stomach twisting. The man doesn't move, but his scream doesn't stop. It just keeps rising, louder, impossibly louder, until it fills every inch of the chamber, until the walls tremble, until the very air splits. And then, the machines turn their attention to me. The world tilts. My stomach lurches, cold sweat slicking my skin as the truth unfurls around me like a sickness. The whispers coil through the air, threading through the grinding of the machines, the crackling static that prickles against my ears like unseen fingers. They're speaking, murmuring, but the words are just beyond my grasp, distorted, layered, wrong. The air is thick, heavy, pressing against my chest like unseen hands, forcing the breath from my lungs. The man in the scorched coveralls doesn't move. His charred hand trembles as he keeps pointing, silent, unblinking. My body resists, every nerve screaming at me to stay still, to not look. But something pulls me. Not physically, but something deeper, something insidious, like invisible strings wound tight around my spine, forcing my gaze toward the machine. The steel press groans, the sound grinding through the chamber like a dying breath. The blood-streaked metal shudders, then opens. I see it, the body. No, my body. Crushed, contorted, a grotesque ruin of twisted limbs and shattered bone, the flesh flattened and torn where the press has done its work. My face, stares back, frozen in a silent scream, mouth locked open, eyes bulging, filled with something worse than terror. Recognition. I stumble back, my own breath ragged in my ears, but the moment I move, the whispering stops. A pause. The machines halt mid-motion. The furnace flickers. The gears stall. The entire chamber holds its breath. Then the dead turn. One by one, the figures slumped in the shadows, the bodies trapped in the gears, the mangled workers lining the conveyor belts. They lift their heads. Joints crack, necks twisting at unnatural angles, blackened fingers twitching as if waking from some horrific slumber. The man in the coveralls lowers his hand. I am not supposed to be here. I am not supposed to be alive. And now they're going to fix it. The steel press hisses, not with steam, but with breath. The blood on the surface thickens. bubbling as something inside the machine shifts, something unseen but waiting. A single thought slams through my mind, drowning out the rising static, the growing chorus of rasping voices. I never left this factory. I never walked through that gate. I never had a choice. The world around me buckles and warps, the walls convulsing like something alive, breathing in and out in ragged, wheezing gasps. Metal twists, beams curl inward, the ceiling stretches into darkness, impossibly high. My legs move before my mind catches up. I'm running, stumbling, my boots slamming against the cracking concrete, but the ground shifts, fractures splitting open beneath me. Flames roar up from the chasms, licking the air with searing heat, their glow stretching shadows into grotesque, writhing shapes. The screams come next, howling, endless wails of torment that wrap around me, claw at my ears, hammer against my skull. The workers, the forgotten. They never left, and now their agony is all-consuming. I can't stop. The heat sears my back, my breath shuddering in my lungs. My fingers scrape against rusted metal as I lunge forward, up the crumbling stairwell, my own heartbeat drowning in the factory's roar. I shove against the door, too heavy, too solid. But then, suddenly, it gives. The night air crashes into me, cold and sharp, a slap of reality against my fevered skin. I'm out. The factory bellows behind me, metal screeching in a voice too inhuman, too furious. The ground trembles as if the entire structure is alive, suffering, enraged. But I don't stop. I tear through the overgrown lot, past rusted fences, my body screaming in protest. I don't stop until the world is silent, until the night swallows me whole. Only then, miles away, lungs burning, heart rattling in my chest, do I turn back. The factory stands still, lifeless. Hollow. The smokestacks stand dark, empty, no movement, no heat, no sign of what I saw, what I felt, but my gut twists with something worse than fear. Because my phone buzzes in my shaking hand. Marcus. His voice is a whisper frayed at the edges. Skylar, the smoke, it's back. As always, thanks for listening.